Welcome to another episode of Two Ales and Hockey Tales with Wally. And today I am so excited to have on a 65-year-old from London, Ontario, Canada, a fifth-round draft pick of the Toronto Maple Leafs, a staple of the Aurora Tigers and Kingston Canadians. In 77-78, had 72 points in 80 games played with the Saginaw Gears of the IHL, was named the second-team IHL All-Star team, and then laced up for 230 NHL games between the Toronto Maple Leafs and Pittsburgh Penguins, where he had 30 points or over 30 points twice as a D-man. And he ended up playing 14 pro seasons and is also the father of two former Potters. Welcome to the podcast, Greg Hotham.
Well, thanks, Brent. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, no problem. Don't call me Brent, though.
What is it,
I
Wally?
won't be myself out here if you call me Brent.
Wally. Right?
Oh yeah,
is it Wally?
no,
Okay.
that's the yeah. No, when I get out to the shed, I don't really want to be called Brent anymore.
Yeah, I don't blame him. Nobody
Actually,
calls me Greg anymore either. So
I actually got a chuckle at work today because I report for the KPIs for my department. I now am called Wally in the KPIs, so that's good. I'm not even Brent at work now either.
yeah, well, I've had the nickname Hawk since I was 12 years old, and everybody calls me that too. So
Hawk?
yeah.
How'd you get
Yeah,
that?
that was an old golf thing, right? So when I started playing golf at like 12 years old, I was playing with a buddy of mine and his brother, and they kept losing their golf balls. I kept finding them. And so he just nicknamed me Hawkeye, and then it just short formed to Hawk, and I've been called that ever since. So,
Because you
over
had a good
50.
eye for golf balls, eh?
Yeah, well, when you lose them, right, back in those days, right, golf balls were a premium because you couldn't buy them, right? So you didn't have any money. So anything you found it was a gold. So I ended up finding a heck of a lot of golf balls, and that's the reason how I got the name, and it stuck with me all these years.
That's interesting. I also looked for a lot of golf balls. I grew up beside a golf course, so that's how I started golfing, was finding all the golf balls, just like yourself. Okay, so how we know each other is what I get into, and I guess two of your sons are former Potters. Episode 68, Scott, and episode 62, Andrew, which he is in the top 5 of most played episodes.
Yeah, I guess I don't know why, but you guys had a pretty good one there. I thought it was is pretty funny, and actually, I didn't know some of the stuff that Andrew was talking about, so it kind of enlightened me on a few of his escapades over the years, um, uh, which is probably just as well that I didn't know half of them. But yeah, he's got some interesting stories for sure, and yeah, he was. Him and Scott were two different types of players, right, and two different types of kids and stuff. So it was an interesting time. Both kids playing AAA hockey and so on, right? And so yeah, there's I'm sure we got a lot of things to talk about with both of them as well.
Oh, that's for sure. I actually have never seen Scott play, but I feel like after I pod with someone, I can figure out how they play. So I'll see which one you're more like by the end of this podcast.
Well, I think they're a little bit of both, right?
I
My play. I wasn't a fighter like maybe Andrew would be. I didn't have that short a temper, but I'm probably a little bit more in the Scott mold in that sense. But back in the tier 2 days of my first year in the I did fight a fair bit. You pretty much had to back in the I because that was kind of the old slap shot days, right? So, you had to kind of fight to survive, so to speak. And so, but after a while, I just wasn't built for fighting. I was built for, the other part, the offensive part of the game. So I said, you can either spend your time in the penalty box, sore hands, or you can play the game. So I chose the other one, which is probably just as well because I would have got my ass kicked.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're not, for how big some boys were. Like they weren't the Giants like the '90s, but there were some big boys, right?
Well, there were some real tough players, right? We're going back. I mean, in the eye, maybe not so. I mean, there were some tough guys, but when I first made the NHL, which was '79, I mean, that was still some tough hockey players, right? The Broad Street Bullies were still playing. Boston had some real tough teams, and back in those days, fights were fights. And what I mean by that is that they were toe to toes. There wasn't any grabbing the arms and grabbing the jersey.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was bombs, right? And so uh, if you were tough, it was a tough way to make a living. But if you weren't tough, you had to decide how you were going to do it. And that's what I said earlier, right? I had to decide. And I
And what age
decided,
was that? You decided that was what once you got into pro?
I think it was probably after my second year pro, probably.
And
Right.
that's when you're
So
like a second team all-star and you got like 72 points. You were fighting and doing all that. So you were like Andrew then.
yeah, a little bit in that sense, but it wasn't like, Andrews, he would provoke more than I would provoke, right? You know
He
that. You
provoked
played with him.
everybody. He provoked
Exactly.
everybody with everything.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it was,
He had the worst hairdo on the team and he made fun of my hair all the time.
Well, yeah, has he told you about my hairdos in the past? Or he
He was-
hasn't showed you any pictures or anything like that, which are kind of funny. But see, my hair back in those days was like Andrew's, right? So, but yeah, I mean,
I saw the pictures today for your poster. I saw the dude you were going with, and it was Andrew. And your face, and when you were their age, you kind of looked like a combination of the two of them. It was kind of freaky, actually.
Yeah, well, yeah, somebody's told me in the past, like Andrew looks more like me than what Scott does, right? But yeah, I don't know.
But now
it's
I think you look more like Scott right now.
yeah, I don't know. It's kind of funny how things go, right? I mean, but yeah, back in those days, though, like I said, I had to start making a decision. Right, if I'm going to play in the NHL, am I going to be a heavyweight? No, I don't think so. So the thing that got me there was my offensive ability and my ability to pass the puck, and wasn't from my fighting. So,
Right.
so yeah, I had to decide, and I think I made the right decision.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And okay, but we got to get back to just how we know each other. And
Sure.
I guess I did the MBA with your son. He never really used his, eh?
Well, no, it's not yet. I don't know. I mean, who knows, right? I mean,
It's useful stuff though. What we went through, the life experience, the people we met, and like the challenge of playing hockey and school. Like even if you're not like if he's being a cop instead of in the business world, you still use all that, right?
Well, yeah, and he went through the university same as what you did, right? And so your time management is so important, and you have to do that in real life. You have to be able to do the kind of multitask, and it shows your ability to do more than one thing at a time, and be team players at the same time, right? So,
Okay, before we get into where and what are you doing now, I got a couple random questions. What were
sure.
your favorite trips when you going overseas to see your kids?
Well, we went to two places. My wife went over to Cardiff, I think 4 or 5 times, I think.
And I met you there. I met you there my first year, for like 5 minutes, I think.
Yeah, I think. Now, was that in Andrew and what's his name's apartment? Was that where we met, or was
I
it at a
think we
game?
met at a restaurant.
Oh,
I
yeah,
think
because there was a thing
at the
going on
Bay,
that night.
right? When
Yeah,
with
that's
all the
right.
fans.
Yeah, yeah. That was I went to Italy to see Scott when he played there. And that was just after our granddaughter Violet was born there. So it was good, but certainly not like Cardiff. Like we really like Cardiff. I guess it was more Canadianized, if you want to say that kind of thing, right? But it was just a great old city. Obviously, the hockey fans were really into it, and I was back in the big blue tent days too, right? So it was. I think the boys love playing in those type of arenas, because here in Barrie, we had a rink called the Dunlop Street Arena, where back in the old days, the Barrie Flyers used to play, and I couldn't stand it, but the kids loved it. And just old style, had its own history, and creaky floors and everything else, right? And Big Blue Tent was kind of the same way. And so the new guys were built for that arena. It was perfect, really, at the end of the day.
It really was. That team was perfect for that arena. And it's weird because I really love the BT, and I grew up in a small little rink like that myself. And I always loved playing in little rinks because wouldn't have to skate so far. Okay. And then random question. Where were your kids born?
Both of them were born here in Barrie. It was funny.
I probably would have said that in their podcast. I should know
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Both were conceived in the U.S. and born in Barrie. So Scott was in July and Andrew was in August. So they're
Okay,
both
so you guys had it all
off-season
planned
kids.
out. You meant to.
Well, I don't know if we had a plan like that, but it's it worked out. But had we really worked it out, we could have had them both in the U.S. and they would have had their dual citizenship. That would have been perfect. But at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter. So.
Right. Okay. Well, okay. Next question then. Where and what are you doing now?
So what I do now, I'm basically retired from business and so on.
And what
But
did you do in business?
well, I was in the electrical field for about 20 years. And then I got into the investment side. I left the electrical field and got into real estate investment. I did that for about 8 years and then decided to retire. So I've been retired probably for 2 years, 2.5 years now. But I do have two things on the go that I'm doing now. Is one, I'm the chairman of the AAA hockey here in Barrie. So I run that organization with a lot of nice, great people. And I just took that on last March 1st, I guess was my first start at it. And a gentleman was retiring. They asked me to take his position over, which I did. So that keeps me busy, obviously. And then I'm also the president of the Toronto Maple Leaf Alumni, and that keeps me busy between the two of them. So I got lots on the go.
You're the president of the Alumni Association for the Maple Leafs?
I am. I
Holy
am.
moly.
Yeah. Don't tell anybody that, okay?
Well, I didn't know. Nobody had told me.
Yeah. Well, I thought your crack staff was right on the ball there, but
Well, the research team didn't find that today, I guess. So what all partakes in that then?
but the alumni party, you mean?
Yeah, like being the
Yeah.
president.
Well,
What do you do?
well, we have our monthly meetings, right? So you chair the meetings, and then as an organization, we decide a lot of different thoughts and ideas, and we give a lot of money away to charities. And our last giving was probably about 2 years ago, where over a period of 3 years, we were giving away almost $1 million to 5 different charities. And then we'll get through that, and we'll probably pick some more after all those are done. So,
Well, I don't know if you've heard what I'm doing, so I should probably bring this up then, since I didn't realize who I had on. But the Cardiff Devils jersey, my last game worn jersey ever of hockey. What I'm trying to do is raise money for charity with my new platform here.
mhm.
So that is being raffled off on my website, www.aleshockeytales.com, and you can buy tickets for that jersey. And money raised is going to be going to mental health and adolescent mental health in the area I live now. So if anybody wants to buy a jersey, and hey, since I got you on, if you're the president, if you guys want to donate something, I'll put it up on my website and we'll raise some money for the charity of your choice.
All right. Well, let me look into that for you. It's not, I don't make those day-to-day decisions, but leave it with me.
Just letting
Okay?
you know, just letting you know.
Sure.
I'm trying to raise money for some charities now that I have this platform. So this is my initial raffle, is my own jersey that was hanging in my closet, and I thought I could spare one. So I'm
Sure.
trying to get this going.
Okay. All right. Leave that with me. All right.
All right. Well, anyways, that's cool that you're doing that.
Yeah.
You must get to be a part of a lot of cool events, I would think.
Yeah, well, we always have things for our guys to do, and obviously the bigger names, like the Gilmores and the Corsons and Darcy Tuckers and stuff are always in demand, right? So, but Toronto Maple Leaf Alumni is a big brand, and we're hoping in the next 2 to 3 years after this COVID BS gets through, that we can start, getting into different parts of the country. I mean, we've held games all over Ontario and other parts of Canada, and we hope to start doing those games again. So,
yeah. Okay. So then I guess the other part of what you got going on is you also have grandkids around too, eh?
Yeah, well, Violet was born in Italy, as we just mentioned, and she's in grade 1 right now, and she's a going concern. And Everett is 3. He's not quite at regular school yet, and he's a big kid for his age. And then Andrew has Hudson, and Huddy's a going concern, 100 miles an hour. He's got 2 speeds, stop and full out. So he's he's a chip off Andrews off the block there, I guess.
Oh, actually, I got another random question for you before we
Sure.
get into this. I thought of this while I was out and about today. How dirty was Andrew's bedroom growing up?
You're talking about the pizza underneath the
Or the
underneath
Coke
his.
bottles? Navigating Lieutenant,
Well, no,
Bayfield Brewing Company.
well, there was never any Coke. It was always Pepsi, as you know,
Oh,
right?
sorry. That's sorry, Andrew.
Right? Yeah.
Sorry. I thought it's Coke.
Yeah. No. So yeah, it was funny. You'd go upstairs to, he'd fall asleep eating or something like that, right? So you'd fall,
So
or
this
he'd
was a
wake.
habit that started at your house then,
Yeah, so he'd
because
wake,
it carried
he'd
on to
wake up
Cardiff.
and yeah, so you'd wake up and you'd be walking by the room. You look underneath his bed, and there's a plate with a half a piece of eaten pizza there or something, right? So it's just, yeah, it just drove us nuts all the time, right? And
Yeah.
but he's
I'm sure
I
Ash has
don't know.
cleaned that up now, right?
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. We'll see. I don't know. I don't ask those questions, but yeah, it was a brutal habit that he had there. But yeah.
Sorry, I had to ask. I just
Yeah.
thought of it today because this was before like Ash was living in Cardiff full time, right? And he
Yeah.
was a single guy, he was hungry at night and then he got tired, right? So just
I'm sure he probably fell asleep. I don't know how many times with burgers or subs or something all over him, right?
good
So
gosh, right? Yeah. The only time that happened to me was when I won a championship in Germany and the pizza was on me in the morning, right? Like,
well, you're allowed that, and you won a championship, right?
I would think so. Okay, let's get into your career then. So,
Sure.
minor hockey, was that in London? It said you were born in London. Is that where you grew up?
No, actually, I grew up in Aurora, so I'm a small town guy, right?
So you did grow up in Aurora and then make the local tier 2 team or whatever.
Yeah, so back in those days, there wasn't any minor or major, right? Everything was just one. So if you were a peewee, it was,
That's what
you know,
I'm coaching
y-
right now.
yeah. So there wasn't minor peewee, major peewee. It was just one. So if you came in as a minor, you played for 2 years, and so on. But the good thing about me, when I was peewee, they changed the ages, and I don't know how or why, but I ended up playing 3 years of peewee, which was kind of advantageous to me, obviously. But so I played all my minor hockey there. I was also a rink rat there too. So at 12 years old, I got a job at the local rink, and just sweeping up and doing all the crappy jobs that you had to do. Get paid about $1 an hour, I think it was. But at the end of the day, especially on the weekends, Saturday nights after public skating, we got to skate basically as long as we wanted. Right, so we'd be there till 2 or 3 in the morning and then walk home, right? And so that was so good for me as far as my hockey career goes, because you're getting half a dozen guys out there playing shinny and having a great time, and stuff like that, right? So yeah,
Well, playing hockey and having fun just makes you better, right? It doesn't always have to be so structured and doesn't always have to be the way I guess hockey is nowadays with all this AAA and all the stuff, right? Like just playing hockey with your friends is a pretty important thing.
yeah, well, back in those days too, there was no structure to games, right? I mean,
Yeah.
now that there's so much coaching involved now, and so we basically played. You played on talent alone for the most part, right? It wasn't, yeah, okay, you had a forecheck and this and that, but now every zone is structured. You got to be here, you got to do this, which I think in a lot of ways takes away from players like, say, you or myself or whatever, the guys that had imagination that wanted to go out and play, and show that side, other than yeah, you got to be over here, you got to be over there. It's more like a checkers game at the end of the day nowadays, right? And
It
so
really is though.
that's
Like when you see where every guy is, they're all in the same positions on each team, right?
yeah. And I don't I mean, I'm one of those guys, I guess, the old guys always say, oh, back in my day, this kind of thing, right? But there was more offense, more flow. I mean, let's put it this way. When I played, Gretzky had 212 points or something, whatever he had, right? I mean, so
I've watched some of
would
those
you
games. The defense was suspect.
absolutely, yeah, for sure. And again, there was no structure. It was
I
just
don't mean the
basically
defenders like
right.
yourself. I mean the
Yeah,
back checkers too, right?
yeah,
Getting back
yeah,
to the house. It
yeah.
was wild.
Yeah. There's no, sagging five guys back to the goal crease or below the hash marks. There was nothing like that at all. And that's all it is now. I mean, I went to two games last week in Toronto, and and one of them was Tampa Bay. And Tampa Bay is so good on the offense, but defensively they just grind everybody down to nothing basically. In Toronto, the only reason they won that game was because Campbell, how well he played in the net. But, they just shut down Toronto all game until, the last actually minute and then in overtime, which, as you got to have your goaltenders do your games here and there. But that certainly was. But, I'm not a great fan of today's game just because it's so tight checking. Don't get me wrong; these guys are really good hockey players. They're exceedingly talented. But at the end of the day, dollar for dollar, if you're going to watch a game, I would have rather watched a game from 35 years ago than watch it now.
I personally, I mean, when you were talking about that Leafs game or whatever, I haven't watched a game this year. I've tried a couple times and I don't get through. I would much rather be out here talking to you about playing hockey than watching the game nowadays. I miss, like, not that everybody should be fighting, but I miss when people got mad at each other. Like, there's not enough body checking. There's not enough battling for the puck. It's like just skill. And I mean, that's fun to watch sometimes, but I
Well,
miss the
yeah.
other stuff.
I mean, they skate so well and they shoot the puck so well and they pass and that. But there doesn't seem to be the emotional games like we had. And
Yeah.
like the and I guess you got that from your fourth line who had, a bunch of, guys that could knuckle draggers that could fight, and it was entertaining and scared for your life out there sometimes, right? And there's a lot of players in the NHL right now that are pretty chippy that I'm not so sure they would have lasted 30 years ago because somebody would have wiped them off the map and within 5 minutes. And
Yeah. The
the
chippy guys
rule,
now aren't even close. They wouldn't have even
no,
thought of being chippy back then.
no, the rules, protect them in a lot of ways, right? So, but when you're playing teams like Boston and in Philly and so on like that back in those days, everybody had at least three or four, if not more, tough guys back in those days, and it was. And if you got out of line, you quickly got back in line at the end of the days because somebody was going to get you, right? So,
And the thing was, that was the same when I got into pro. Like, it was no different. When I did something wrong a couple times in pro, it didn't matter how small I was getting beat up by the big guys
mhm,
because that the game policed itself. And if you did something
absolutely.
like that, that happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, but anyway, I mean, these guys make huge amounts of money, and I don't. I think it's great for them. Don't get me wrong. I'm envious as hell. I wish I could have had that when I played, but I didn't, and I'm not going to hold that against them. I'm glad guys are making money now. That's the way it should be. All right.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
I mean,
They're the best in the world. They're bringing entertainment. They're look at all the people wearing their jerseys and walking around like they do, right?
well, and you hit the perfect word, right? It's entertainment, right? Before it was sports. Now everything in sports is sports entertainment, right? And right, you're there to entertain. I mean, people are spending three, four, $500 for a ticket, right? They want to be entertained. And I don't know. I'm not overly entertained nowadays. I still appreciate the talent it takes for them to play, and so on. I just wish the games were a little more exciting than what they are.
I totally agree. I 100% agree. But hey, back on track now.
Sure. Yeah.
Making your hometown Aurora Tigers. That would have been a big day.
Yeah, so I was drafted by the Toronto Marlies, right? So the Marlies at that time were probably the best junior team in Canada, and so I went to their training camp, got cut 2 years in a row, I think first cut or something like that. And I go, wow, I'm not going to make it. So I started going to St. Andrews College, and I don't know if you ever heard of St. Andrews College. It's one of the private boys' schools, right? Same as Upper Canada College. So anyway, I went there to think, well, I'll go to the college route and see if I can get a scholarship down in the States. And so, but what I ended up doing was playing for the school team, but I also played tier 2 at the same time. And so there was a bunch of times where I would play 2 games in one day, play the school game at say 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then drive from there to our tier 2 game that night. Yeah, so I probably played at least 3 games on a weekend, or sometimes even 4.
I've never heard of those schools though. So that's like one of those prep schools, like in like Notre Dame type thing.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, they're really old schools. Like they've been around for 150 years, right? So they're really college, and there's 3 or 4 other ones in Southern Ontario, but now St. Andrews College plays. Their school teams are huge, and they play teams out of the U.S. and everything. So they do a lot of travel. So so the school team back when I was, like I said, I was trying to go for a scholarship, and I ended up, what happened was one year, I think Kingston Canadians were the first OHL team in Kingston, right? And it was kind of cool because they wore the Canadian uniforms and stuff. So, but anyway, they came one Christmas and called and said, listen, are you interested in coming if we make a trade for you? Because we got 2 or 3 defensemen that are hurt. And so that was kind of a big decision I had to make, because I was going to private boys school. I got a chance to go for scholarship, and do I want to ruin that to go to play in Kingston? And
how old are you?
I think was I 18 at the time, maybe.
You're getting right to that age where it'd be time to get the scholarship too, right?
Well, yeah. So, but back then as well too, you got to understand is that the university was not quite still the way to go, right? And it wasn't the viable alternative that it is when you were there, or it is right now. So still guys at that age still wanted to go OHL. Back in those days, they called it the OHA, but the OHL. So I said yes. Now that was a big risk because there was 3 defensemen that were hurt, and so you're looking at, okay, when they come back, am I still going to play? So that was a risk I had to take, and I ended up taking it, and it worked out really well for me. So I played about a year and a half there.
I got that down here. Research teams got it here. So you played a year and a half, and your first year you had a big playoff. So when you got there just after Christmas, you did all right, but then you had a big playoffs, right?
Yeah, well, what happened is they put me up on forward, right? So we had, I don't know if you know Mike Crombie, he's from your area.
Well, actually, I have that written down. So Mike Crombie, I have that on my notes here with a little arrow, because I didn't know his name was Mike, but when I saw Crombie, the research team clicks on that, and his sons BJ and Ryan, I know. So
right.
For starter, BJ, he played for Idaho, who beat me in the East Coast Finals when I'm playing for Dayton.
Right.
And then Ryan, I won the Sutherland Cup with in Elmira. He was going to Laurier and played on the junior B team with me when we won the title.
Yeah. It's a small world, because Scott ended up being a BJ's teammate in Barrie. Right.
So no, yeah, and Scott and I actually talked about that for a second today. But yeah, it's very weird, and especially when I started looking around at your age bracket, all the last names I knew, I'm starting to put it together. This genetics thing, it might have something to do with it, because all the guys your age, I knew all the guys my age.
Yeah, well, yeah. So it was funny because Mike was a 50-goal scorer. Right. But I think he had hurt his knee either the last game or the last week of the season. I can't recall, but he was out for a bit. So I think the coach had been fired with about 3 weeks ago in the season, and our manager took the team over. So he came to me and said, listen, you move the puck really well. You skate well. Would you mind going up and playing wing? And I go, sure. And I ended up being on the first line. It wasn't like he put me into the third or fourth line. He put me right up on the first line. I go, this is great, right? Top 2 guys on the team. And I think one of them, I'm trying to remember, was Tony McKegney on the left-hand side, right? And Tony was a goal scorer and he could skate. And another guy named Brad Rhinus. And Brad was, I think he was drafted in the NHL, but he was a first rounder in the WHA. And I think he was a 50 goal scorer too. So, I had my hands full. So actually the first game I played up forward, I ended up scoring 3 goals. Right. So I go, shit, this is easy. What's nothing like playing wing and getting, I can
Yeah,
score like this all
three
the
goals
time,
your
right?
first game. So then you
Yeah.
think you're a winger for the rest of your life, or what?
Well, no, I kind of figured I would go back. I mean, that's your natural position, right? So, but it was funny because we'll get into it later. But the coach of the Marlies, because that year we played the Marlies in the first round, and the coach was George Armstrong. We'll get back into that probably at some point. But so anyway, yeah.
I
So
don't
I
know if we
played.
will. You usually should just go with it when it happens on this, because a
Okay,
lot of
so
times you don't ever turn back around to this.
so what happens is that the following year, let me get through the playoffs first. So anyway, I end
Yep.
up playing. We lose, and back in those days they had 8 point series, not 4 out of 7 or anything like that, right? So we take the Marlies right to the final game, and I think it was like an empty net goal in the final game, and the winning goal was a phantom goal off the post. So anyway, as it turns out, they win. They go on to win the Memorial Cup, and then the following year, I get drafted by Toronto. So about fast forward about 35 years, I'm coaching a tier 2 team and down in Toronto, and who's at the game with George Armstrong. And he pulls me over and he says, Greg, he says, I really want to thank you. Right. And I look and I kind of a dumbfounded look on my face. I said, George, why would you thank me? He says, well, you made me look good. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, I'm the one. We were in the room, to banter names back and forth about getting drafted. He says, I went to bat for you. He says, nobody else wanted to draft you, but I did. So they gave me the opportunity. He says, and we drafted you. And so at that point, I didn't know, right? So, but I
And you
thought
need a
so.
guy to go to bat for you,
Well, you
right?
do, absolutely. But here's a Hall of Famer thanking me to making him look good, and I'm the one that should be thanking him because he's the one that really made my career, right? And those are decisions that you don't see or whatever, right? So it was a pretty cool time when he said that to me, and I still think about it. And when he passed away a year ago, I passed that story on to his nephew, and his nephew, I don't know if you know, that was Dan McCourty, was an official in the NHL for like 20-25 years, right? So yeah, I passed that story on to him, and it was something that I'll always remember, right? Just some guy going to bat for you that you never knew until 35 years later.
And and sometimes that happens, and like sometimes you don't know what people think of you or whatever until people tell you, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it was funny because the WHA was playing at that time too, and I never got drafted in the WHA, right? And so I go, okay, well, if I'm not getting drafted by this league, I'm not getting drafted in the NHL either. And for some reason I did, and I found out obviously why. But those drafts back in those days were different. You didn't go to the draft and sit in the seats and wait for your name to be called. You just found out like a day later they called you. Right.
Right, but
So
the WHA draft had already happened and they hadn't taken you, and then
yeah,
then
exactly.
this
Yeah.
guy, that's then the NHL draft happens, and this guy steps up and says, like, I believe in this guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And
That's
so,
cool.
and then 3 years later, I'm playing in the show, and all the pieces fell together. Like 35 years later, I found out how and why, and so it was pretty cool.
No, it is, and it's interesting when I get talking around the different stories you hear and how all the things happened and who's like stories relate to whose. It's
Sure.
very interesting, and the messages I've got from starting this, like, crazy times. Yeah, yeah, interesting stuff. But anyways, so then you did get drafted after the big playoffs, or is it after the year 2? When did you get
It was
drafted to the
after it
Leafs?
was after year 2 because back in those days we had a 20-year-old draft, right? We didn't have 18-year-old drafts back then.
Oh, it wasn't until you
Right.
okay, so it was after
Right.
your juniors, like your junior career is like kind of done, right? Because you went pro as soon as you get drafted.
Yeah, so and that's the way it used to be, and quite frankly, I think the way it should be still, personally. But
Imagine
yeah,
how much better junior hockey would be, right?
well, and quite frankly, I think there'd be more guys that would actually make it, and I think it would be easier on everybody, even the scouting. Like, I mean, for scouts, I mean, how many? They're probably like the weathermen. They're only right about 20% of the time, right? And with all due respect, you're looking at a 17-year-old kid and trying to project what he's going to be like at 20 or 21 or 22. And so that is so tough to do, other than the real stars where you just know, right? They have the it. And uh but here, at least back in the days, you saw them for 2 years. You saw either them progress or they didn't progress. And so you had a bit of an understanding that, whether this guy was going to make it or not. And quite frankly, when I look after the names and the draft year that when I got drafted, how many players actually made it, it's unbelievable. But nowadays, you're lucky if maybe the first six obviously will make it, and after that, it's a crapshoot.
But like you're really right. Like though it's the same though at any age. There's kids that stop getting better. There's kids that start improving at a faster rate. Everybody does it at different ages. There's guys that like become men at different ages. There's guys that like whatever goes on in whatever personal life. But it's weird because once that it yeah, you're right. It's like 18 to 20.
Hmm.
There is a big change because the guys that were drafted high my age group, once you got to like the end of college, the guys that like it just all wasn't the way as the same as our draft year, right?
Yeah, and I like I said, I wish they would go back to it. I get why they do it, but because there are some players at 18 that can play. Let's face it, right? Very few, but there are a few. But I would think, I would hope that at some point or another they end up going back to that, in some form or another. What that is, I don't know. But whether it's just the first six players you pick and the rest are, or 20 years old or whatever, I don't know how you would go about doing it. But yeah, I think it, like I said, is that there was so many players that made it back in those days. And you got to remember too, back when I played, I think there was only 20 teams, right? Too. So
But
there was a
I
lot.
think just at 20 years old, you just know more who's actually going to be good.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And you know what? It took me 3 minor league years to finally get there. Right after that, so again, going back to your point a couple minutes ago, is that guys progress at their own rates, and I was allowed to progress at my rate because of how the system worked. I'm not so sure that's the same system nowadays.
Well, and
Mhm.
it's what you've been exposed to too, like the kids growing up in smaller towns and the big cities and what you've played and what you haven't like. It all depends, right? Like how fast you're going to grow when you get to a different challenge or what you're up against. Like the same as you, my third year pro was my best year of hockey before my knee
Mhm.
injury. That was when I was really doing it and then I got hurt.
Right,
But yeah,
right.
it took me 3 years to figure out it all.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, you're at least I was a 20-year-old kid, right? Never, other than, I'm moving to a new country, Saginaw, Michigan. I'm sure we'll get into that, right? That was right after because I went to training camp, and here
That's
I
where
am,
actually
right?
that's where we're at. So basically, you get drafted after your big year two, and you go pro right after. So what do you sign? And you go to Saginaw Gears.
So, so I went to training camp, unsigned, in Toronto, left there unsigned, and kind of figured, okay, well, I'll end up in Dallas because that's where their farm team was. They had a split squad there. Half was Chicago and half was Toronto players, right? So I figured, okay, well, that's where I'll end up. Well, guess what? I got cut from there. So next thing you know, I get an invitation to go to Saginaw, Michigan, right? International Hockey League, right? Kind of slapshottish in a lot of ways. A lot
But
of
I
tough
thought the
players.
IHL was no. So there's the WHA still or no?
Still
Oh,
no.
hold on, cabinet maker.
Geez, I wish I could have got a few of those today to help
I
you
know.
along, right?
Sorry, I caught you off guard.
That's okay.
I didn't have one booked till Friday, and it was gonna be a non-alcoholic episode, and then I had another one next Monday, which was the same. And I just did one with kids, and I just wanted some grown-up talk and to have a couple beers. So I caught
Well,
you off guard, but thank you for being ready to rock when I
no
when I
problem.
called.
Well, maybe we'll have the other two cone heads and myself and you on, the three
That's
of
what
us
I would
together,
like to
right?
do next time. I got to have y'all on individually before I can do all three, the three stooges together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So anyway, I ended up going to Saginaw, Michigan, and so I have a pretty good training camp there, right? And so the coach calls me, and Don Perry. Now, Don Perry was ended up being in LA at one time, and you may not recall because you're a little younger, but he tapped the guy on the shoulder and said, "Listen, you go and get that guy." And the guy just said, "No, I'm not doing it." So there was a big problem that he faced because he sent a guy out to get a guy, even though everybody knows it happens. But
That used to
player,
happen all the time, though.
yeah, but the player said no, right? And that's where the issue came in. Said, "I'm not going to do it," right? So anyway, so he calls me in the office and he says, "Listen," he says, "You've had a really good training camp." He says, "But we're only going to offer you $6,000, right?" And here I am, $6,000, and I'm like, okay. So I think my take home pay every 2 weeks was like, it was like, what was it? Every 2 weeks I made $363 every 2 weeks, right? And so, and I still got the pay stubs here at the house, right? It's kind of embarrassing, but you're playing for the love of the game, and I had nothing else going on, and so you go and play, and so we had such a great year that year too. We ended up winning the
So,
championship, right?
so
So
basic. Did you say you won it?
yeah, we won the Turner Cup the first year that I
Um,
played, right?
well,
So
oh man, I want to get into that right now, but what I wanted to ask was because like the leagues changed over the years. Was the IHL and AHL were basically like the same
no,
level at one point, but back when you're starting, you're saying the IHL is back like it's the coast
yes,
nowadays. And yeah, okay, but you
yeah.
won it.
So yeah,
Winning is
so
cool anyways. I played in the coast, so you basically won the coast back then.
yeah, so just to kind of back up further, so there was two leagues, the Central League and the American League, and they were on par. Okay, so there was a bunch of teams in the American League that were more, say, East Coast teams, and the Central League was more central. All the teams were central, right? But they were on par, same players, kind of thing, same talent level, everything. And then there
Were
was
those the
us;
farm teams then?
those were the farm teams. And then us in the IHL is what
The
you would
next
say the
level.
coast, right?
Yeah.
So we only had 16 players in each team, which is probably the same as what the coast had, right? So um, so I think we had 9 forwards, 5 defense, and 2 goaltenders or something like that. That was a team makeup. And so there was a shitload of ice, right? I mean, I was played to death there. I loved it. And so the first year we won the championship, and I played well. And then what happened is the next
Anything,
same.
any good stories winning the championship? Like, or was it just a cakewalk?
No, we our last 2 series we ended up going 7 games in their last 2 series. Oh no, sorry. The first series was 7 games. Then we won in I think 4 or 5, and then the last series was in 7 against the Toledo Gold Diggers. Right, and now the Toledo Gold Diggers, you gotta like this story, right? So we used to
I
go in
like the
there.
name.
Yeah, we used to go in there on Friday nights. Now the old Toledo Arena, our dressing room was right beside.
It's
Uh,
the
uh,
same read. I would have played it then.
Maybe, I don't know. The dressing room was right beside the canteen, right? So people would be lined up to get beer and pop and all that other stuff, right? But we would always play there on 10-cent beer night, right? So we get there, and by the second period, everybody's shit faced, right? Screaming and yelling at you, throwing shit and everything. But to get out of the dressing room to get to our bench, you had to go up through the seats and then down through the seats
It's
to
the
get your
same rink
bench.
I played in.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah. But it was 10-cent beer night every time we went in there. It was unbelievable. Right? You imagine going in there with a buck and just getting hammered.
Oh, God, I can't believe you played that rink too. So that was that. It so that was my first game ever in the coast was in that arena, and I thought, where the hell am I?
But we had a bunch of arenas like that. Port Huron. I mean, that was small. You ever played in Port Huron as well?
No, no. But the
That
Toledo arena, that was like its last season or one of its last seasons, and then they brought in the new arena. But it was there would be people over the glass with microphones and like right in our ears, and they'd be swinging at our fighter like, and he's in the middle of a fight. They're like trying to swing at him over the glass, and there's people smoking right beside us. Like we're on the
oh,
bench, and they're smoking cigs right beside us.
oh yeah, and they didn't have any no smoking back in those days, right? I mean, they're
No.
smoking, they're drinking, they're screaming and yelling, and but there was brawls going on because back in those days, if the game's got 2 or 3 goals out of hand, you had brawls. Like I think that year we had 2 or 3 bench clearing brawls, and we had Port Huron was a rink that was probably the size of your dressing rooms, right? And I remember my uncle going one night from London, and he showed up. We ended up having 2 bench clearing brawls in one game, and it was just like it was a free for all.
So you have a bench clearing brawl, and then everybody gathers themselves, gets back on the bench, and then you have another one.
We had another one, right?
So the game's not over when everybody gets off
Oh
the
yeah,
bench and fights.
yeah. So we would go into Port Huron, and I'll tell you the story. The next year, we went into Port Huron. They had a really tough team. The following year, they had a guy. I don't know if you know. They had a guy like Archie Henderson, who had that year. I think he had 400 and some odd minutes and penalties. Gary Risling, who had I think he had 400. They had another guy named Brent Tremblay. He had 500 minutes and penalties. And there was 2 other guys that had 300 minutes and penalties. So every time we walked in the arena to go to our dressing room from getting off the bus, all you could hear is guys up there in the speed bag going like this, right? And, and it was just, that's the way it was.
And so then,
And
like, was it actually like, are they just gonna fight you?
well, not so much me because, everybody had their tough guy. Like I had to fight
So they're still
still.
gonna fight the tough guy.
Yeah, absolutely, right. So yeah, there was no getting around it, and that's the way that league was. Everybody had their 3, 4, 5 tough guys, and it wasn't uncommon the guy had 100 and some odd minutes and penalties and having 45 goals. I mean, it was just but it was fun at the same time, scary at the same time, but man, I would do it all over again. It was fun. So the next year, I get to training camp again. I got cut from Toronto, still not signed, and so I go to Saginaw, and he gives me a
How
big
long do they
raise.
have your rights when they don't sign you and you're
You know
like a
what?
professional hockey player?
I don't know if it was 2 or 3 years, but as it turned out, I ended up signing. He brought me in. He said, listen, I wasn't supposed to sign you last year because he says, I only brought you in just because to fill out the roster for training camp. I didn't expect you to make it, and you did. He says, so you had a good year last year. We won it. We're going to give you a $2,000 raise. Right. So I go from 6 to 8. Wow. Big
Big
raise,
one.
right?
Big one.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Right. But shit, I'm 20, 21 years old. Who cares, right? I'm still playing hockey or whatever, right? So that year is the year I had 72 points. I was power play. I made the all-star team. So halfway through that year, back in those days too, we had to play 3 games in 3 nights, almost every weekend. It was almost like Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yep.
So in January of that year, I got called up to Toronto for one game. They played an exhibition game against a Czechoslovakian, I don't know, national team or something
Like
like
to the
that, or a
Maple
club.
Leafs?
Yeah, and it was a Monday night game. They had an exhibition game against this, I don't know, Czech national team or Czech club team or something, right? So I'd already played Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I get a call Monday morning and say, listen, you're going up to Toronto to play the exhibition game tonight. So I got to fly from Saginaw into Detroit, into Toronto, play that game, and then come home the next day. So right then I knew that I was on the radar, right? Because I've been having a good year, and all of a sudden now, they call me up, because they could have called anybody up from
Wherever from the one
the
below, the
yeah,
Central League or the
yeah,
AHL, right?
which was the Dallas Blackhawks at the time. That's where their farm team was, in Dallas. So right then I knew I was on the
I already got it figured all out now. Okay.
right. Yeah. So
Research team has the rest.
so yeah, I knew I was on the radar at that point, right? But It was
How
funny
does that
because
game go with your fourth game in 4
actually,
nights?
hey, you're playing on adrenaline, right? I mean, you're
Your first
going and
time, are you in Maple Leaf Gardens?
Maple Leaf Gardens. I got the big fro going. No
Beautiful.
helmet. Oh yeah, just
Good gosh.
get introduced
You
out there.
mustache too, right? Little duster.
I think I had the porn stash going.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
so
did.
yeah, it was pretty good. Right? So yeah, so I go and play the game, and yeah, I'm playing on adrenaline only. I mean, I wasn't tired probably till 2 days later. I mean, even the next day coming off it, right? I was just high as a kite because everybody at home, growing up in Aurora, was a small town, right? It's only you know 30 miles north of Toronto. Everybody saw me, so it was nonstop phone calls and everything else the following day, which is kind of cool. So I knew I was on the radar, but when you're playing in Saginaw, like I said, our schedule was kind of funny because you play every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and sometimes it was 2 games away or 2 home games or whatever, right? So, Sunday nights, we never practiced on Mondays. So everybody went out, all night on Sunday night, right?
Wait,
And
Sunday, was it not Friday, Saturday that usually you try and slip in a Sunday afternoon so that the boys could really get after it? Because the East Coast, we had a lot of Sunday afternoons on the third night.
we never had any Sunday afternoon games ever, right?
Oh,
I don't even know
those
if we
ones you
ever,
didn't even
yeah.
warm up. You just kind of went out there, looked at each other, and were like, "Yeah, we're really doing this." And then you go back to the room.
Yeah, so all our games, I think they were 7 o'clock games, right? So we were always done by 9:30. And the bars were closed at 2 o'clock. That was new to me because everything in Ontario was closed at 1 at those days, right? So closed at 2. So we go out and there was this little lounge that we would go to called Larry's Lounge, and we would go there and drink our 45 cent beers or whatever until 2, and then we go to somebody's place until 5 or 6 in the morning, and then we go out for breakfast. We go to this one place. It was funny because I think it was $3.99. You used to get a dozen eggs, a pound of bacon, and home fries for $3.99. And
Did
then
you just
in
say a dozen eggs?
a dozen eggs, a pound of bacon, and home fries for $3.99. Right.
Not
So
cooked.
oh yeah,
So
oh
you
yeah.
say you're how many people are eating this?
No, so it would, there'd probably 3 or 4 of us that would go out because we were still out, right?
You're
So
pooling your money together when you're making 8 grand a year to get.
yeah, but $3.99, I mean, shit, right?
Oh
So,
yeah.
so on the morning, and then what happened? That was right across the street from the GM plant. Well, the GM plants used to get out at 7 in the morning, so the bars used to open at 7 in the morning,
Night
right?
shift's ready to rock.
Yeah, so we go over there, and we probably drink till about 9 in the morning. We played Queens. You ever played Queens before?
No, what's that?
You ever played Queens? No.
Queens? No.
Well, you sit around the table, and yeah, so you get a deck of cards, right? And so you start dealing them around the table, and the first guy that gets a queen, he orders 2 shots of anything that he wants. The next 2 queens have to drink them, and the fourth drink queen has to pay for, right? And so you play that for about 20 minutes, and some guys just, if it's a bad day for you, it's tough because you're
Okay,
not going
hold
to
on.
last.
So it was the first 2 queens.
The first queen, he gets to pick whatever 2 shots
Whatever
he
the
wants.
drinks are.
Yeah, right. So if he wants to pick, 2 shots of tequila or 2 whatever, he can pick whatever he wants. The next 2 queens have to drink them, and then the following queen, the last queen, the guy has to pay for them.
Okay. I got it. Yeah.
So yeah, so if it's a bad day for you, you're drinking every shot and you're paying for them as well. But the game doesn't last very long because you're only going to be in it for maybe a half an hour, maybe.
Yeah. I'm not man enough to play that game.
That was tough. That was tough. Yeah, we had some funny games then, but yeah, that was. But that's the way it used to be back in those days, right? And then you'd have Monday off, and then you go in on Tuesdays, and Tuesdays was just a short, practice just to kind of get a sweat going. And then you practice Wednesday, Thursday, have a skate in the morning on Friday, and you did the same thing all over again the following weekend, right? So, and we played, I think 72 games or 80 games that year, whatever it was.
72 points in 80 games.
Yeah. So,
so then that season ends though, and when you get eliminated in the playoffs, you actually get the call up to the Central Hockey League then.
I did. I went up to Dallas, and so we ended up going into the finals. We played Fort. No, what was it?
You only played, I thought you only played like 5 playoff games that year.
Yeah, so we were in the finals at that time, right? And so we played Fort Worth, and Fort Worth was the Islanders farm team. So
Oh, sorry. So you get put out with
for Saginaw,
and
yeah,
then when by the time you join Dallas, they're in the finals.
they're in the finals. So I'm figuring I'm just going up to be, the fill in, the seventh defenseman, whatever, right?
If yeah, in case there's an
Well,
injury, yeah.
yeah, right. So I'm there to have, to obviously, have a good time, but play some hockey as well. But, if there was a good time involved, we were going to have a good time. But at the end of the day, it was about, see how far I could take this. But again, I'm going to be sixth, seventh defenseman. Well, little did I know, I get in there and I'm top 4. So they play me top 4 minutes for those 5 games. So we lose the championship in overtime in the 7th game. And so had we won, I would have won 2 championships in my first 2 years of pro. And so that was obviously disappointing, but it was kind of cool because right after that game, the Dallas coach called me over, and he was a Toronto guy. He ended up being their head scout at one time, Jerry McNamara. He's responsible for bringing Borja Salming over and a couple other guys. And he called me in after the last game. He said, "Listen, do you have an agent?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Who is it?" And he said, so I told him. He says, "We want to sign you." I said, "Okay." He says, "We'll be in touch." So I went home. Probably about a month later, I got a call to go down to Toronto Maple Leaf Gardens and sign my contract.
What was it like for that month being at home waiting for that call?
It was, was it nerve wracking? Yeah, I guess to a point, but I knew it was going to happen, right? Because you're always in touch with your agent. And, he would say, "Yeah, it's coming. Don't worry about it. Everything's agreed upon and everything." So, there's a date coming. There's just, in the summertime, people take holidays and shit like that. Right. So there's other things going on other than just my contract. So, so I ended up going down and signing. I think I had a 2-way contract. Everybody basically did back in those days, other than the big stars. So I had an American League deal, I think, for 13 or 15,000, and my NHL contract was 45 or something like that, maybe 50. And so I thought that was pretty cool. So yeah, so that's how I ended up signing. I had to have that one good year, my second year, in order for me to get signed.
Well, it was then the playoffs, right? Going to Dallas then and playing there, right? That's what got it.
Yeah, and I'm playing top 4 minutes too, right? So
yeah.
yeah.
So
yeah.
Next season, then you got your deal, so you play for the New Brunswick Hawks. What town is that in?
That's Moncton.
Moncton, New
You ever
Brunswick.
played in Moncton? Great,
No.
Great town, right? But
I haven't played in Canada very much.
Yeah, I guess you went to university.
I haven't played in Canada since I was 17, and then I played for the Ripley Wolves for a little bit.
Yeah, so we again they moved the farm team from Dallas to Moncton, and so it was still half Chicago and half Toronto. And the coach this time was Eddie Johnson, EJ, and so and he was a Chicago guy. So anyway, I ended up playing down there. Had a little bit of a rough start, and then he sat me out a couple of games, probably about 15 or 20 games in. And then, all of a sudden, your head's spinning like crazy because, am I going to end up being back where I was last year or what? So anyway, I kind of got my act together. Eddie Johnson was probably overall my best coach that I ever had as far as helping me out on the defense.
So when you say you got your act together, did you just start playing better? What changed?
Yeah, I think sometimes it just took me, let's put it this way, it just took me a while to get my feet wet, right?
I was always the same. I was always like, until I felt comfortable, I wouldn't really thrive. But as soon as I felt comfortable, then I was fine.
Yeah, and I think that, and that's what it was with me, right? And I guess I was still in a little bit of awe, right? Here I am in American League. Am I good enough, right? And so after the initial 15 or 20 games, and sitting out, I'm going, I got to get my act together. I'm good enough to play here. And he put me back in, and I had a great, last 4 months. It was really good. So it was. But Eddie Johnson, like I said, was my best coach that I had as far as defense goes, because he was an old NHL goaltender, right? So he knew the little finer points of playing defense and positioning and stuff like that.
What he
So
wanted as a goalie.
exactly, yeah. So he was really good, and we had some pretty good players down there that ended up moving up. And one of them was Daryl Sutter as well. And
Okay,
yeah.
I got to bring this up this season.
Sure.
The research team was hot today. This is on one team in your first season in the AHL here.
Sure.
One team: Bruce Boudreau, Ron Wilson, Joel Quenneville, and Daryl Sutter.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those are four coaches that are like, what, I guess I don't know if Ron Wilson you'd say is a legend, but the other three sure have coached a lot.
Well, Ron Wilson, he was a pretty good coach. Like he had
Well, he was the coach of the Leafs, right?
But
Like,
and he coached San Jose for quite a while. Like his numbers are pretty good when you go back into
and all
it,
four
right?
of those are on your team. All four of those guys.
Yeah. So Gabby and Boudreau was probably between him and Mark Curtin were my two best friends playing in the minors.
Gabby?
Right? Yeah.
Why is his name Gabby? Do you know?
Because he talks nonstop.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And his other nickname was Dirtbag too. Because you remember the old guy, what was a kid in Charlie Brown? The kid walking around with dust all the time, all over him.
I hardly remember Charlie Brown.
Anyway, he was like Gabby was like an unmade bed, no matter what he wore, right? And he had stains all over his clothes and stuff. But he was still one of my best friends, and still communicate to this day. And he was a hockey guy through and through, so I knew he was going to be a good coach at some point. And he was at one time the top player in Canada, junior. And the unfortunate part is it just never panned out as far as his playing career goes in NHL.
See, when I see him behind the bench, the whole physique doesn't scream hockey player. Navigating lieutenant.
Maybe I should get this out. I can do this because of Andrew, right?
Oh, there you go. Have a Pepsi.
Yeah.
You should have had a Coke. Really upset him.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that to him. Yeah, so Gabby and I lived together probably 2 or 3 times, right, through our careers. And we were pretty close, and great guy. And so Quenneville, I played with him in Toronto as well. Him and I and Laurie Boschman were the 3 rookies in Toronto that following year. But getting back to Moncton, we had a really good team, and I ended up having a good year that year too, at the end of as far as points goes and so on, right? I think I had like 50 points or something, 55 points or whatever it was. So, and I had heard rumblings halfway through that year that I was,
you're even really on the radar.
Yeah. I had, you hear stuff through, certain people, trainers and stuff like that. Listen,
you're right though. You're right. I remember hearing stuff like that. I remember hearing it in Denmark that they literally told us around December, they're like, a lot of these imports are going to be getting changed for next year because they want to get bigger and tougher or something, and not so little and skilled. Yeah. And I was like, oh, great. Nice to hear. But no, you do hear those things. I had heard when I went to Syracuse and I had a great preseason, they're telling you to get an apartment tomorrow. And then that next day something changed and they never did tell me to get the apartment. But yeah, you do hear those things. So sorry, go on. Yeah.
So anyway, and I knew I had a pretty good a playoff, and then we got beat out. And so I got called up to Toronto, right? Because what happens after the year, the farm team gets beat out, right? And
you got called up like the your third year pro there when you're in your first year in the AHL.
Yeah.
For the
So I
playoffs, you're
didn't,
like a black ace.
yeah, exactly. Right. So what happened was that was the year, I think it was 78. And Toronto was playing Montreal in the semifinals because they had just beaten out the Islanders in the seventh game. Right. So anyway, after the final game we play, the coach comes in and says, "Listen, you're one of the guys that getting called up. Toronto wants you to get there." I said, "Okay." So I'm driving back, but there's already been 3 games played in the series, right? So I'm driving back, and it's the night of the 4th game. So I'm driving through Quebec, and then I'm driving through Ontario, and I finally get the game on the radio. And so I'm listening to the game all the way home from Kingston, basically all the way to Aurora at the time. And I think next thing you know, that game, Toronto ends up losing. So I never ended up going to practice or getting into a game or anything that year. So yeah, so at the end of the day, I knew I had a pretty good chance, right? Because the following I ended up making it the following year, but I just knew that I was right there.
So you're around the team though, like every year. You're going to training camps every year, right?
Yeah, but back in those days, I wasn't in good enough shape, and I wasn't quite good enough to play. I mean, you realize it after the fact, right? I wasn't just in good enough physical shape to, and I
Yeah.
didn't know what it took, right?
Yep.
I wasn't what you would call a good professional because I didn't know what it took
Yeah.
to be a
Yep.
professional, right?
Oh,
And so,
yeah.
which included off season and
Yeah.
everything else, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I quickly
Oh,
learned, right? So,
yeah.
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 So that third it took me 3 years to figure that out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, there
Yeah.
was a lot of burgers and a lot of beers going down those 2 summers, right? So,
Yeah. 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 I might
so
understand.
hey, you got to enjoy yourself too, right? I
Well,
mean,
I'd like also when you get sent to the coast, you're kind of like, wow,
mm,
may as well start like just trying to enjoy hockey again, right? Like,
mm,
like,
mm.
yeah.
Now,
Anyways,
the one thing I forgot to tell you, did you? I don't know. Were you ever hazed at all back in when you played?
well, I mean, I don't know. I
I
mean,
should tell you my Saginaw hazing story,
well, I
right?
mean, all I don't want is like, people to get in trouble nowadays because of things that we used to do because it was the way it was. And like, that's all my thing is because like when I was in junior B, yeah, maybe like things were pretty aggressive, but like we all laugh about it now, right?
Yeah, well, mine was really aggressive,
Okay.
and yeah, so not
There's some
not
bad
that.
ones out there. There
Yeah,
really
well, this
is.
this this one is so. I was a pretty quiet player back in those days too. Like,
And this is Saginaw.
this is Saginaw, right? Your first year, and we're humming along pretty good. And I'm a pretty quiet guy, but you're still part of the team. And so, they used to have a song all the time, right? That the guys used to kind of sing if you're getting a little mouthy and after practice in the dressing room, then all of a sudden the music would start or the song would start, right? That they're going to threaten to shave you. That was back those days, right? So anyway, one day they got me.
Jesus. Shave
Eh,
you?
Well, it wasn't just shave, right? So one day they got me. So they wheel out the trainer's table, right? And so they they get me on the trainer's table, and they pin you down. So there's like 15 guys to one. So you can fight all you want, but you're not going anywhere. So, you get on the trainer's table and they put your arms straight out like this, right behind your head. And they get a hockey stick and they tape your hands to the stick. So you're not moving. You can't move. And they do the same to your legs, right? So, and then they get the skate lace and they put it up over the pipe over top and they put it into a noose and they tie it to your dick, right? So if you're going to get mouthy, right, they're going to pull on it, right? So, and then next thing they do, they get a hockey sock and they put it over your face. All right. So you can't see who's doing what. You can hear everybody, but they're just putting it over your face, right? Not your nose. So you can still breathe and everything. So next thing you know, first thing they did is he got basically a whole jar of Vaseline. They put the whole jar in my hair. All right. And then they put about half a container of baby powder on top of the Vaseline, right? So my hair is just stuck like that, right? So then they get back in those days, they didn't have, everything was straight razor back in those days, right? So they got the razor and they used to put it up and down the cement wall, right, to dull it, right? And then what they did is they would shave your chest, right? Shave your chest, and they would cut you because the thing's duller and shit, right? And then they would get the rubbing alcohol and pour rubbing alcohol on it, on the cuts, right? And then they did the same to your nuts. They would shave your nuts. So they shaved my nuts.
This
And
is
they
while
would,
you got a sock over your eyes.
yeah, and your arms are straight out, and your legs are straight out, and you can't move. You can't do anything,
And
right?
this is just after a practice at the rink,
This is after a practice, right?
like a
And so,
straight up regular practice, and then they do that shit.
yep, yeah. So, so they did the same with my nuts too, right? They shaved me and everything else, and they would cut me because of the razor blades were too dull, so they would cut you, right? So again, they dropped the is this LPG here, or do you want me to keep going?
No, you can say whatever you no, keep going.
Okay. So anyway, so you're sitting there and your nuts are shaved and they're bleeding and everything because of the dullness, and they poured rubbing alcohol
On your nuts when they're bleeding. Oh my
Yeah.
God. It may
Yeah. So next thing you know is
and these are your
there's,
teammates that you're supposed to go out and play
oh
hockey
yeah,
with the next game.
yeah. And then they poured and then they got the hot stuff and they put that up around your ass, right? And so you're sitting there, and then they shaved your legs with the same razor, right? Cutting you and then putting on rubbing alcohol. And then they got magic marker and start putting magic marker all over your fingernails and shit like that, right? So, and then what they do is they all shower up and everything, and you're laying there probably for 45 minutes to an hour while everybody showers up and leaves. And then the trainer comes eventually, cuts you down, and then you get up and you go in the shower and you try to get all the shit off. Now all of a sudden, now you're part of the team, right?
It's like getting into a gang.
Almost, yeah, right, yeah. So I mean, any of the hazing they have now is nothing compared to the shit that I went through, right? But
Well, that's not even what I went through was not even bad. It was like they were completely fine. It was all fun and games. Like that's nuts. That's crazy.
yeah, and then but back in those
But then
days,
like yeah, it's a different, and it's weird when I start talking to different eras and like kids that played now and kids that like, and then older guys like you and then my age and like then a little bit younger than me, like Andrew and Scott, or even like when I first got to pro, it was a lot more like what you're talking about, not the hazing, but like the actual hockey part of it. But
right,
that
yeah,
hazing needed to go, and thank goodness it all got stopped when it did, because
absolutely,
it was scary. I remember hearing stories of like when I was getting into junior of other teams, and like the stories of the bus of like going into the bathroom, and whatever it was, like they tape all your clothes together and whatever, and every rookie on the team was in there trying to fit. You couldn't come out till all your clothes were on and you're all in there naked or whatever. That was one of the ones I had heard was like a thing right before I was getting into junior, and you're like a 15-year-old kid and you're just getting into high school and you're just trying to figure shit out, and then all of a sudden you're hearing like this is going to happen to you and you're like, what? Right.
yeah. But back and then,
But you lived that through that, like, and then you had to show up to practice the next day, like,
yeah, and
and then like,
everybody's laughing and joking, and you get through it, and you move on, and you're part of the team now. You're considered a vet, right? So,
but then what happens, like, when they ask you to do that to someone else, like, once you,
I never participated like that. If we ever did anything to anybody in the future, I might have cut maybe a half an inch off his hair or something, but that was it, because I knew what I went through. I would never put anybody else through the shit that I went through.
right. But then when it's the gang mentality and like everybody's doing it and you're like, oh, you got to be a part of it, right?
Yeah. So it was, that was interesting without question. But so I ended up in Toronto. I think the only thing they did there was just cut the front of my hair, I think, off, and my mustache off, and that was it.
And
So
mustache off with that hairdo. Like,
yeah,
gosh.
yeah.
You
So it was, yeah.
So where are we here? We're in
So we're
so
just
you
in,
finally get you're on the Leafs, right?
yeah, yep.
But that all happened with Saginaw.
That all happened with Saginaw. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was my first year. Yeah, that was my. I
How
was
far
playing
into it?
probably 3 months into the season, probably. Yeah, I think it was 3 months, maybe just after Christmas. I can't recall.
Yeah, no, that's brutal. Okay. Well, anyways, back to positive stuff, right?
Yeah,
Here we
sure.
go. So we're about to go to the NHL, right? Because we just
Yep.
went to year 4, which in pro, and that is with New Brunswick. And you've gone from the Saginaw Gears and that bullshit to being a second all-star, working your way up to the AHL. And then you're like, so how do you end up figuring out you're making the Leafs the next year? Because you play 46 games. Do you make it out of camp?
I made it out of camp, and I basically knew going into camp. And the reason I knew is because of my sweater number at training camp. It's
Really?
kind of fun. It's kind of funny, right? Back in those days, you'd invite about 50 guys, right? And if you had a lower number, then you had a pretty good chance of making it, right? And so, I mean, if you had number 52 out of 55
You're
guys,
that's a training camp number. Yeah.
yeah, you're shit out of luck, right? So I came in and I was number 4. Plus, I had just signed that summer, right? So I had a pretty good, or the summer before, but I had a pretty good idea of being called up at the end of the year, even though they got beat out in the 4th game. And then I show up on number 4. I knew, I had a pretty good chance. And then I had a really good training camp as well.
When the call ups and downs didn't happen like they do nowadays, right? Like the season before when you're doing well in the AHL and then you finally
Yep.
get the call up at the end of the season, like if they probably could have called you up and sent you down like they do nowadays, you probably would have had that the year before, right?
Yeah, it's possible, but they still had some guys ahead of me that they kind of, I don't know if they wanted them, but they kind of figured out that they were there before me. That that's how it kind of worked in the past too, right? These guys have been there before, get the first chance, and then eventually, if you keep knocking at the door, it's going to be your turn, and that's what ended up happening to me. So there was just a few guys ahead of me, and then so
Are they playing the same role as you though? Because
yep, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, pretty much. But my first year in the American League, when I'm pretty sure I got like 50 some odd points, and that was pretty good, right? So I was playing power play, I was killing penalties and so on. So I mean, I was playing a big role on the team,
Yeah.
and and again, my coach ended up, doing the best thing for me, which was sitting me out to make me kind of wake up a bit, and then I went from there. So I mean, there's 2 ways of going. I either could have just said screw this and I'm out, or I got to get my act together, right? And I chose
Absolutely.
the latter.
So when you do make the NHL out of camp,
Mm,
some of the guys I wrote down, because these are people I heard about, right? Like when I'm growing up
sure.
as a kid, is Daryl Sittler,
Yeah.
Bjorn Solming, and Tiger Williams are all on that team.
Yeah. Mike Palmetier, Ian
Yeah.
Turnbull, who else? Dan Maloney.
So what's that
Uh,
like playing your first game like for the Toronto Maple Leafs, the start of that season? Then
you
when you
know,
make it
it,
out of camp and like you're a Toronto Maple Leaf.
it was probably the coolest thing that's ever happened in my professional hockey career, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like, well, because you grow up north of Toronto, you watch them on TV, um, and now you're on the same ice. And so you walk out in the old Maple Leaf Gardens, and our dressing room was behind our bench, right? So you had to go down through the kind of the hallway to our. And back in those days, I never realized it so much, other than when I first started playing those games, is there's TV lights that come on, and it's bright as hell, and you don't really realize it, right? But when you practice there, those lights aren't on. It's dark as shit. And then you get out, and all of a sudden you come underneath here, and you can look up, and all of a sudden you see basically 16,000 people, and it is the biggest rush you could ever feel, right? And you had our family was in the seats watching and everything else. And the first game I played regular season was against the Rangers, and Phil Esposito was playing for them. And it's just such a rush. I mean, just, to play basically for the team that you grew up liking, right? And it's not like, all of a sudden I was going to play for the Atlanta Flames, right? Which still would have been cool, but certainly not like this, where you're coming out to 16,000 people. And so that was the biggest rush I had in hockey, I think, really.
Wow. I
Yeah.
can't, I literally, so this is how I can relate somewhat, not even really at all, but like you getting to do that. The year I'm out of college, I've gone to Syracuse with Columbus. They've guaranteed me an AHL deal. They decide they don't really like me. Well, that summer, I'm at my cottage right here in Kincardine. The Toronto Maple Leafs call my agent and say, we want to see him tomorrow morning. Fitness test, interviews, want to sign him. And I'm like, oh my God, I am signing with my favorite team of my whole life. Like, if this goes well. And I leave here, stay at my parents. I go to Toronto. The fitness test goes well. Like, I was actually like in really good shape. I dropped like 20. I would like actually had like abdominal muscles, hadn't seen them before in my life. I was doing well. So I go there, I have the interview, everything goes good, and I leave there thinking like, holy shit, that just went really good. I'm going to sign with them. And my agent tells me the same thing. And then it just keeps dragging on and dragging on. And then the team I had loved my whole life, like it comes down to deadline day, I got to either sign with Syracuse or not. And they're like, well, we want to wait longer. And I'm like, oh my God. And I was so excited for like weeks. And I'm like, it took me, I don't know if I'm over it yet. But like, you actually got to play for them.
Yeah, and that's the coolest thing, right? So I played 46 games that year, and what ended up happening is Punch Imlock came in that same summer, right? Now, Punch Imlock was an old school type of manager, right? So if we wanted to talk to him for any time, and I had to one time, right? I had to go up and I had to talk to him about renting an apartment. I had to get his okay, and because back in those days, if you get an apartment, you had to have your employer sign. Not everybody, but this particular place that I was moving into had to have signature from your employer. So I had to go upstairs and talk to him. Well, you had to go up in a suit and tie, right? So you're there at a regular practice and you're in a suit and tie, right? So they had fired Jim Gregory that summer. Jim Gregory was loved by all the players. He was a player's general manager, just really nice guy. Did everything for you. Kind of, I wouldn't say one of the guys, but he was close enough, right?
Yeah.
But Punch came in and he was the total opposite. Just everything my way. And so he ended up doing a bunch of not so nice things to some of our guys. And that year with Daryl Sildler, he was the captain of the team, right? And he had come off a couple of years previous to that, having a 10-point game. Like he was the player of the Toronto Maple Leafs. He was the identity. And so he ended up screwing up Daryl, right? He would say back in those days, there was a thing called Showdown, and it was filmed in the summertime. So certain players from teams would go to this arena and they have, skill competition. And what would happen is the TV would show it in between periods, right? Kind of a season-long thing. So he said to Sittler and Mike Palmetier at the time as well, we're not going to allow you to play in this, right? Which, you just don't do that. And then he came in and said, okay, we're going to take the ping pong table out of the room. Right. Yep. And then
took
it was
fun away from hockey.
Everything. Right. So
don't get me started on that shit.
Yeah. So yeah. Yeah. I listened to you and Andrew talk about the Germany. What was that guy's name again?
Brittig.
Brittig. Yeah.
Gosh.
I remember Andrew telling me a story about time about him. He says he wouldn't let the defenseman take slap shots from the point. Everything had to be a wrist shot.
No, like actually, and then if you actually took a slap shot, you literally wouldn't play you'd be done.
Yeah.
It was just a control thing, and it was nuts.
I'm surprised Andrew lasted as long as he did there, even though he didn't last long. But anyway, getting back to the point is that Daryl ended up resigning his captaincy because of all the shit going on, right? And then
That's never fun.
and then he ended up getting traded that year at Christmas time. Joel Quenneville, Lanny McDonald got traded to Colorado. And that was the beginning of the end, probably for, I would say, almost 15 years. It was mismanaged from there right into early 90s when Cliff Fletcher finally came in and did a really good job of bringing, I think they ended up going to the semifinals for 2 years in a row.
I remember that.
But they
Yeah,
went
that's
through
when
some
I'm
tough,
young.
they went through some tough times, mainly because of what they did.
Well, you take a
But
guy out that all the players loved and he would do everything for the players, and like you got a ping pong table and you're having fun playing hockey, and you got Daryl Sittler being Daryl Sittler, and then next thing you know, it's about you and it's about that.
yeah, and there's just, a lot of small little things, right? That, you would take it for granted that it's easy, you should be able to do it, and you couldn't do it. Well, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. And it was just, and then when he traded Lanny McDonald for no apparent reason other than he was Daryl's best friend on the team, right?
Sounds like some European stuff.
Yeah, right. And it's just like, I never thought shit like that would take place over, right? So that was my
On
first
the
year.
Toronto Maple Leafs, right? And you're growing up loving the Leafs, thinking everything is perfect, everything works normal, everything is the way it should be in hockey. And then you get there and you're like, this ain't normal.
Exactly. You're playing with basically your boyhood idols. I mean, I was still in my teens when some of these guys were playing, right? So, Ron Ellis was there, and Ron Ellis is, he's pretty much a Maple Leaf legend. And so I'm playing with these guys, and I'm going, okay, this shit's going on my first year, right? So then all of a sudden, about 40 games into it, I'm playing pretty well. I'm getting a fair bit of ice time, but I wasn't a real physical player. And Punch him like physical player, especially defenseman. I was a puck moving defenseman, right? So all of a sudden he decides he's going to bring in Carl Brewer. Carl Brewer was probably 45 years old at the time. And Carl was not well liked by the guys. And I got to know Carl. He was a really good guy. He was just put in a tough position, and he should have never been put in that position by Punch Himlock. And then he started bringing in a couple other guys. And so they sent me down after 45 games. And so I spent the rest of that year in the American League. I might have got called up here or there, but I spent the rest of that year in the American League. And I think that year too, we ended up going to the Calder Cup finals as well.
It's interesting how many finals you went to and how close you like, and yeah.
So and then the next year, basically, I get sent down again right out of training camp.
I got that here. So you had a big AHL playoff and almost win, right? Is what I got. So what's the finals there?
So we play the Hershey Bears, and we should have won that series. I think we lost in 6. And but again,
you never forget that shit, do you? Cabinet maker.
You never do, right? I mean, it's here I was in my first 3 years of pro or 4 years of pro. I've been in 3 finals. Right?
Yeah. My first 2 years of pro, I lost in the finals both years. And then Germany wonders why, and beating Heim, I really let my hair down the 3rd year. Well, it's because I lost the first 2 years in the finals, right?
Yeah. So I thought, holy shit, this is the way. This is, it's going to happen every year. Obviously, it doesn't happen every year, right? So
sure doesn't.
But so the following year, I just didn't make the team out of training camp.
You didn't play as good. You had a good summer back home, or what
No,
happened?
it was just they brought in some other defensemen, and
as soon as they sign a bigger new guy like a free agent, right? Then it just puts you right down the.
Yeah. So you're good enough to play, right? I mean, I played there for 45 games. I knew I was.
But they want to tell
play.
and then they just see some guy that could, whatever they pay them, and then they bring them in, and then that's the new guy running. Let me guess here. Oh, the power plays used to be different back in the day.
Yeah,
There wasn't an umbrella, so you're probably just you're a right shot, so you're just running the right side D spot
pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
on the
Yeah. So
power play though.
but we started when I was in the American League that year. We started where defensemen coming into the middle. We started that umbrella
Oh, you
that year.
started walking the
Yeah,
middle then?
yeah. So what I did make it out of training camp, so I'm pissed off. And what happens through the year, I get called up, I don't know, 3 or 4 times, right? And I know I'm good enough to make
And
it.
you're
I
dominating
know I'm
the
good enough to
AHL.
play. Yeah, and I'm playing well down there. And so it was funny that year. So anyway, I end up playing a full year in Moncton. So what happens? This is funny. So I have a couple of buddies of mine that were, one guy was playing in Detroit, Mark Curtin, and there was a guy playing in Boston, Keith Crowder. Now Keith Crowder is down, relatively close to you guys. He's down in Essex, but he played in Boston for a bunch of years, right? So we used to travel to Florida after the seasons together and have our after year hockey trips like you guys did over there. You guys went down to France or Germany or whatever you did skiing, right? So
Yeah.
the three of us went to Florida. So anyway, we're in the playoffs in the American League, and I think we're in the second. I can't remember if we're in the second round. And so Mark calls me one night the week before. He says, "Listen, are you going to come?" I said, "Listen, Mark, we're in the playoffs, and I'm not leaving the team. There's no way I'm doing that." So he goes, "Okay, well." So next thing you know, we play on a Tuesday night in Portland, Maine, and he calls me and says, "Listen, I still got this ticket for this cruise, and I want you to come with Crowds and I down, to Fort Lauderdale." I said, "Kurtz, I'm still playing. I can't. I'm not going to leave the team." So the next night we're playing in Portland, Maine. I hurt my knee, right? So we get back the next day, and the team says, "Listen, you got to fly to Toronto because the team doctors want to take a look at it." So I fly to Toronto. And I'm rooming with Gabby Boudreau at this time, right? And I think we ordered pizza like 30 nights in a row. Like neither one of us cooked at the time, right? We had pizza boxes as tall as you were, right? That's how many pizzas we had, right? So anyway, I go to Toronto and they say, "Listen, you're done for the year." You go, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, you partially tore your ligament in your knee, so you're done." So I fly back to Moncton, and now what happens is
You hit the
Mark.
cruise, didn't you?
So what happened? I go back to Moncton, and that day Mark calls me again, like 3 days later. He says, "I heard you just got hurt." I go, "Yeah." He says, "Come on down on the cruise, right? Team's still in the playoffs." And I go, "Oh, I can't." And then I thought, you know what? You guys screwed me this year, right? I should have been on that Maple Leaf team. I was in the, I got called up 3 or 4 times, played well enough to stay. You know what? Screw this. So Gabby's my roommate. So this was on a Thursday. I flew back Thursday night again to Toronto, got to Aurora. I booked a flight. The next day on Friday, I flew down to Fort Lauderdale. On Saturday morning, we got on a cruise for a week, and I left the team. So Doug Carpenter was the coach, and he says to Gabby, he says, "Where's Hawk?" He goes, "He's in Florida." He goes, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, we flew to Florida." And I left the team. I said, "Fuck it. I'm sick and tired of getting run around. I'm good enough to play on this team." And so I
And you're
had it.
done for the year anyways.
I was done, but you just don't do that, right?
Yeah,
But
no, you don't.
you're
Yeah.
right. But
Yeah.
I was just sick and tired of it,
You're
right?
letting
The running
you're
around.
letting them know. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted out. If you're not going to use me, I want out. Right. So anyway, I ended up going to Florida. We got on a cruise ship and we went around the Caribbean for a week to 10 days and came home, got my car and drove back. So it was all good.
And you guys had a good time, but then the next season you show up, you're still on one more year with the Leafs, right? And you get 3 games in with them, but most of the time is
Cincinnati.
Cincinnati Tigers of the
Yeah,
Central
so
Hockey
so
League.
so that's essential. Again, it goes back to my point earlier, right? We're in the
That's
American
the
League.
eight,
It's
yeah. And
yeah,
is that the old Cincinnati arena I would play in, which was a nice one?
yeah. We had a
That would be
great
brand new back then.
Yeah, because I think, well, the WHA, the Cincinnati Stingers had that had that rink, right? It was 16,000 people or whatever. We would never get that amount, but we had the nicest dressing room we had ever had. I mean, back in those days, it was, I mean, this dressing room was so
Yeah.
good. And yeah, so we ended up playing, we would travel everywhere by airplane as well, right? Because we go to Nashville, we go to Dallas, we go to Fort Worth, Salt Lake City, and shit like that, right? And so
That's your loop.
yeah,
So
Indianapolis, yeah. I mean, it was great cities and everything else, and so and I had a really good year that year. And I remember this one time we went to Salt Lake City. We were there for 6 days basically. I shouldn't say 6 days. So we went to Fort Worth on a Friday, played there Friday, Saturday, spent the day there Sunday, flew out Sunday night to Salt Lake City. Spent 2 days there doing basically nothing but snowmobiling and skiing. Then we played Wednesday, took Thursday off, played Friday in Salt Lake City. So there were almost 6 days.
holy
And
shit, man. Your brain, you're
yeah,
65.
yeah.
You just put all that together from back then.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Because
Really?
yeah, because one of our guys almost got robbed. You got robbed at gunpoint. It's some of these things you just remember, right? It's
Right.
funny
No,
how
when
it's,
it, when
I
when the
can't
big the
remember.
big moments happen, you remember, but I don't remember like a
Yeah,
Wednesday or a Tuesday. But yeah, robbed at
so
gunpoint.
you got robbed at gunpoint, right? But Gabby and I were teammates again, and we went up to Park City, and we were snowmobiling up there, and I think he totaled a snowmobile up there. It was funny as hell, right? So it was just, I look back and all the snowmobiles just going head over heels, just like this, right? You go back and see him, and now the ski underneath the snowmobiles, all it's like crunched and it's all bent in half and everything else. We laughed so much, it was so funny. And yeah, so we spent 5 or 6 days, but that was the way those road trips were, right? You just went to these cities, it was great. But
And you
I
got to
played,
really experience them because you actually stayed there for a few days, right? Like now they
yeah,
just go in, they stop, they play a game, and they're out of there, right?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I had a really good year that year too. I think I played, I don't know, 40, 50 games. I had like 46 points or something like
Oh,
that. I
I
was a
got it
top
written down
10.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you were right up there. So then you get traded though. Like, so you find the Leafs, obviously you let them know you wanted out. They send you down there. You finally get traded for somebody. What'd you get traded for?
Yeah, so how that happened was I think I had got called up to the Leafs a couple times that year as well. And so all of a sudden I started hearing that I was going to get traded, right?
Because you're
And
doing too good for the.
yeah, so I'm power play and I'm top 10 in scoring as a defenseman and top scoring defenseman in the league. And so there was an all-star game back in Salt Lake City, right? So I go to Salt Lake City with Gabby Boudreau. We seem to be like twins, right? Everywhere we go, we're together. So anyway, we go to the All-Star game, and Floyd Smith, who was the coach, or I guess he was the general manager, or scout or something at Toronto at the time. He was at the All-Star game, and he pulls me over. He says, "Yeah, we're going to trade you by end of tonight." And I said, "Oh yeah, okay." Well, it never happened, right? So I play the game and we go out that night. We have a really great time. Salt Lake City is a great city, right? I mean, so, and you have about 35, 40 guys flying in from various other teams, and you're having a good time. You're meeting everybody, and you're having a few pops after. And so we fly home the next day, and we fly into St. Louis from Salt Lake City to get another flight, and a snowstorm. So we're stuck in St. Louis for a few hours. Back in those days, you didn't have cell phones, right? So nobody knew what was going on. So Gabby calls his wife in Cincinnati, and she says, "Is Greg there with you?" He goes, "Yeah," and she goes, "He's been traded." And I go, "I never knew. Nobody told me. I couldn't. No, there was no. My agent couldn't tell me because we're on the road. We're flying back from this road trip or this All-Star game." And so I ended up, we got home that night. I had to call, and I ended up getting traded to Pittsburgh that night. I think it was February 2nd of 1982, as a matter of fact. I still remember that date.
You would remember that day. I would remember that day too. I don't know if I'd remember the date, but I'd like getting traded. Like, yeah, like your whole life you wanted to be a Toronto Maple Leaf. You've worked your whole life to do that, and
Yeah.
you were one, and you were good enough to be one. And then you get traded, but then it looks like you get into a good position there because then you start playing, eh?
Yeah, I do. And that's all I ever wanted was a chance. And I didn't care where
And
after,
that's what players want, right? Like
yeah, just
that's
give
all
me a
you want.
chance.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so, and again, the best thing was I was going back to my old coach, Eddie Johnson, who I had in Moncton. So I played well for him. He coached me. So it was an easy transition for me. But it just goes to show you just never know in hockey who you're going to meet up with a year, 2 or 3 years down the road, right? So mind your P's and Q's, play well, be coachable, and you never know what'll happen, right? And who's going to pick you up. And so that ended up happening. I went there and I had a pretty good, I think I was there for, I don't know, 20 or 25 games or something that year, plus playoffs.
25 games played, 10 points, and but you're playing 5 NHL playoff games. Like you never played in the playoffs before that.
No, not in the NHL,
Like
not at
that's a
all.
different
Yeah.
animal, right? Like
Well,
I
those
guess it's
5 games,
different nowadays, right? Like the NHL is such a different thing. Like there used to be a WHA and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But see, that was a 5 game series. We never played in the first rounds. They were always 5 game series, right? So, and back then too, you played 2 games in 2 nights, and then you took a day off and played two again. It's not like now where they play every second night, right? So you're playing 4 games in 5 nights. And that's tough,
Oh yeah.
right? And so you ended up playing 5 games in 7 nights. And so that was really tough. But I ended up I think I had 4 or 5 points or something, whatever it was in that series. And I started out not playing a lot. And then the last 3 games, I think we went with 4 defensemen and that was it. And one of them was an overtime game. And, you know, playing at a playoff level with 4 defensemen,
In the
I,
NHL.
I think I must have lost 10 pounds easy in a week. Like I would probably lose, 4 or 5 in a game, and then you gain some back, as you know, right? But I
No,
played
I
so
don't
much, it
know.
was
I actually gained weight playing
yeah,
hockey.
a bit of a butterball,
Yeah,
really.
yeah. Well, I'd always think that I had worked so hard I needed to eat a lot after.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so it was but yeah, I played really well at, and I do have some video of those games that I watch on YouTube, and it's that one of the games was probably the best game I ever played in the NHL. But we played the Islanders too, so they had, I think they were just coming off 3 Stanley Cups in a row, and we took them to the last game, right? So they blew us out the first two. It was like 7-2 and 8-1 or something like that. And so 3 game series, you just figure they're going to go back to Pittsburgh, and they're going to kick our ass, and have a good summer, and we'll see you next year. Well, we end up winning the third game in overtime, and then beat them by 2 or 3 in the fourth game. Now we're going back to their
And it's
building,
yeah, you're
right?
almost a
And
big upset.
yeah, so we're
So
up three
that's
to
what
one.
against Trottier and them.
Trache, Bossy, Gillies, Potvin, Billy Smith, and that, right?
And you're
So
top 4D man playing against those guys.
yeah, so like I said, we're only 4 defensemen. That's it. The only way we'd get arrested if one of us was in a penalty box. That would be it, right? So, and I'm loving it. I'm going, holy shit! Like this is what I've always wanted, right?
You just
This
wanted the
is
chance and you're
I
finally
just want,
getting it.
yeah. So I'm getting it,
Yeah,
right?
and
And
you're in the midst of it. You're in the middle of the goddamn playoffs.
yeah, and we're playing these 3 times Stanley Cup champions, right? So I'm loving this. So we
Holy
get
moly.
into the fifth game, and we're up 3-1, right? With like 5 minutes to go in the game. I think it was 3. Yeah, it was 3-1. And they get a fluky goal, and then they get a power play goal, less than 3 minutes to go, to tie it. And we go to overtime. We lose in overtime.
Oh,
John Tonelli scores. They go on to beat Vancouver in the final for their fourth Stanley Cup in a row.
John Tonelli. I played at his arena in Halton Hills, right?
Yeah, yeah.
There's an
He
arena
was such a
named
good
after
player.
him.
He was a great player, a really good player, underrated, but he was so good. But yeah, so I I just gained so much confidence. Then I knew I belonged right then and there.
Oh
Right.
yeah,
So
like you're in the playoffs and you're playing against those guys and you guys are almost winning it and you're
yeah.
playing top four and they're what? So there's a couple D not playing or how many do you have?
Well, we had six dressed, but they would
They
only
just
play
didn't
if
play,
they
really.
just didn't play, and they would only play if
That
we
would
were in the penalty box.
your confidence would grow. So then the next season, that makes sense that you get there and you're like, I'm here and I'm ready to rock. And you finally got the confidence, like I am an NHL player and I'm doing this. And then the next two seasons, you got 32 and 30 points, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I think I had 35 or something. But what ended up happening was is that summer I worked my ass off. I mean, I ran mile after mile. I ran sprint after sprint.
It really
And
does help, doesn't it?
oh, oh yeah.
It's weird once you figure it out that it really does
Yeah,
help.
I've been on both ends, and I like that one a heck of a lot better. I tell you, it's but
Hockey's
yeah, I
way
just
easier when you're skinny.
you know what? I went into training because we had our training camps in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, right? The home of the Johnstown Chiefs,
I've played
right?
there too.
Yeah, yeah. Great rink, isn't it?
It is a great rink. I actually really like it.
So we had our training camps there, and I went into training camp in better shape than when I came out of training camp. I was just such good shape. I went in there. I wasn't stressed. I wasn't tired. I wasn't anything. And so what ended up happening was is that I got off to a fabulous start.
And
And I was at
you showed up like guys do now. You showed up like a
yes,
pro and you
yes,
showed up ready to rock where other
yeah,
guys were using that to get in shape.
yeah. And so I got off to a great start. The first 20 games I had I think I had like 15 points or something, or I can't remember what it was. I was in top 10 in scoring. I still have this little thing upstairs and it's on the fridge and it's about that big. And it's the top scores in the NHL on November the 22nd or November the 2nd. Well, I can't remember which one. And there's Gretzky, there's Trottier, there's Marcel Dion, there's Guy Lafleur, there's Dennis Potvin, and then there's me, right? And I'm
Is that
going,
right?
holy shit! Like I'm in the top 10 in scoring in the NHL in November, right?
Really?
Which is cool as shit, right?
Yeah, it is.
And so so I'm and this is
Sorry
all
for
based
burping
on
in the mic.
so this is all based on the playoffs from the year before, right? Because
Just confidence and believing in yourself and like just
absolutely,
having the mojo.
yeah, absolutely. So anyway, I get I'm going really well, and then I get hurt. I hurt my knee,
For,
and
shut up.
so
That's what
so
happened to me.
yeah, so I'm out for 3 weeks, right? And next thing you know, like I'm not I'm not quite there yet, right? But I'm skating, and my knee still hurts, and and I was a power play guy, right? So our power play isn't going very well, and I got off to such a great start. So what comes over to me at practice that can you play? And I go, like I'm not really ready yet. Like my knee's still bothering me, and I haven't had any full contact practices. Oh, we need you in the power play. You just want to play on the power play.
Just
Well,
power play.
yeah, yeah. Well, that ended up being bullshit because I ended up playing, basically full minutes. But every time I got hit, my knee would hurt, right? And I wasn't up to where I was before because I wasn't in shape, and B, my knee was sore, right? So anyway, and then I just got going again, and then I separated my shoulder, right? And so that was for sometime just before Christmas, and then I think I was out for 3 or 4 weeks, and so I just got myself back into it again. So I ended up having a pretty good year overall. It was like 30 some odd points, right? And so, in today's day and age, 30 some odd points in the NHL is probably worth about, $5 million a year, 6 million
Yeah,
a year.
give or take.
Right. Right. So anyway, yeah, so I ended up, it was kind of it was a great start, but the injuries kind of held me back for, a bit. And then
Is that the first or second year?
that would have been because the year before I
Of the
was there
30
for,
point years. Like,
yeah,
is that the
yes.
first or second year?
that would have been my first full year because I was only there for 25 games a year before after I got traded, right? And then the following year, I think I ended up having, was it 35 points the following year, something like that?
Well, I think I don't know. You got traded there. You had 10 points in 25 games. Then you had 2 big years,
Yeah,
and then I got written down like Randy Cart. So like you played with a lot of coaches, eh?
yeah, yeah.
Like a
So
lot of like big name coaches.
yeah, so Randy Carlisle, he was coming off. He was a defenseman of the year. What do they call that? The
Norris.
Was it Norse? Yeah,
I don't
so
know. They
or it
call it
was
that
something
now,
like
I
that. I
think.
can't remember what it is now, but anyway, so him and I were defense partners, and what a great guy to play with. He was such a good player and
Is that
easy for me to
right?
play with.
So
Yeah.
Randy Carlisle and Bruce Boudreau, when I see them behind the bench, don't scream hockey player. Thresher, Belgian whip beer.
Yeah,
You
well,
know?
Randy was all he had one of those kind of roly poly bodies too, right?
Okay, so similar to mine.
But he could log 35 minutes a night,
So could
right?
I. Yeah.
Right, and so he, but he was a good defenseman, and
So he could move if he's playing 35 minutes a
oh,
night.
for sure, yeah. And he was in that series against the Islanders when I was top four. Him and I were partners, and so we played a lot together. And then the following year we were playing together as well. Yeah,
Huh.
so yeah, it's funny after when I look back over all the years you play, and then you look at the guys you played with, and how many are still involved in hockey. It's pretty amazing.
It really is. And like it's deep down, it's I don't know, like for me, it's a lot of it's the guys like you kind of knew we're gonna stay in hockey. Like they just
Yeah,
loved hockey, right? They loved everything about it, or they just were so determined to be the best, or whatever it was. Like you just the guys that are still in it, just I don't
yeah.
know.
And I could have chose to go that route myself, but I chose not to after I retired. Um,
There's a lot of those decisions, right? Like right when you retire
mhm.
is a is the biggest decision making you do.
Yeah, and I kind of knew I was going to retire at that time, and it was just like, okay, if I stay in hockey, that means I got to move again, right? And
Yeah. And you
my
get to
wife,
the point where you don't want to. But we're
my
not there yet. You're
okay,
skipping
sorry,
stuff.
sorry.
Stop it. Back off. Okay? We're not there yet cuz you have 2 great seasons after so you get traded to the Penguins, you have half a great season, you have 2 great seasons. Then the next season you play 11 games played after 2 great years. I kept looking. Mario Lemieux was a rookie that this year. This is the year
Yeah,
Mario is a rookie. And you get sent down after 11 games played and you're over 30 points for 2 years straight. Like, what contract are you on? Because you get sent down to the Baltimore Skipjacks. Because
yeah,
you'd think after 2 years of over 30 points, you're on a pretty serious deal and you're going to be there.
yeah. So what happened was that year, they sent me a contract, and I never signed it. As a matter of fact, I still have it here at the house, right? And I can't remember, it was for like 100 grand or something, and I never signed it.
100
And then
grand for over 30 points?
yeah, and then I eventually ended up signing. I can't remember. It might have been slightly more than that. I can't remember. And that was like July, I think. And then what happened was I got sick in August. I got mono. So
Oh,
I was working out. I was playing. It goes back to my Pittsburgh a couple of years previous. So I was working really hard in the summers, right? So I'm out playing hockey, scrimmaging with a bunch of ex or not ex NHLers, but NHLers at the time, and and I felt terrible. Like I was just out there and I couldn't do anything. But I knew I was in pretty good shape because I was working out all summer, and so something was going on, and I kept working hard. So I went for a blood test, and the doctor says, "No, nothing's going on." So I went back out and started playing and working out and doing everything, but feeling like shit. So I finally went back for another test. It came back that I had mono. So that was in August. I never played again until December, right? So I was out basically 4 months. So what happened in that case is that Pittsburgh got a new coach, Bob Barry,
He
and they
finds
brought
his guys he likes and what works for him,
exactly right.
and where
So
everybody fits, and you're not part of it.
exactly. So I come back and I play. So what they do is they send me down to Baltimore, kind of on a conditioning thing, right? The old 2 week conditioning, but you're going to be down there for like 4 months.
Yeah, no,
And
I went to
so
Dayton for 2 weeks. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So you know all about that, right? So anyway, and then they called me up, and I was up there for. That's where I got the 11 games in. I played with Mario that year, but
Okay, so you didn't start with him. So I
no, yeah, because I was sick, right, for 4 months. So that getting that mono probably it derailed my hockey career, like my NHL
big
career.
time. Yeah,
Yeah,
because if you start that season and maybe you're on a power play with him, it may well, like I said to one guy, no regrets, right?
yep,
Our
yeah.
journeys are what they are.
Yeah, and it happens, and you got to deal with it, right? You move on, and it is what it is, right? So, at the end of the day, I play my 230. I get credit for about 300 for my, because of injury and sickness. So, I was in the show for about 300 games. So, I mean, that's pretty darn good, right? So,
Oh,
at the end of the day,
there's no kidding. Yeah, that's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
But like, yeah, so then you go down to the Baltimore Skipjacks, and
yeah,
I guess you guys almost win it there. Like you guys play
yeah,
15 playoff games, so you almost win it again.
yeah. So we're in the finals, and we got a really good team. And that year we won 16 games in a row. Right? We broke the pro hockey record that year for winning streak. We won 16 games in a row. So we had a pretty good team. We pretty much breezed through the playoffs, and then we had like a week off. We ended up playing Sherbrooke Canadians. Well, what did they end up doing? They bring up a kid named Patrick Waugh, right?
You played against Patrick Waugh.
So we played against Patrick Waugh. He stood on his head in playoffs, and they had some kids when I say that, but they had some guys that were sent down from Montreal after they got beat out, right? So we're playing Sherbrooke. We should have beat them. I think we lost in 6 games, but again, lose the Calder Cup finals. So I'm 0 for 3 in the Calder Cup finals, and so in my career I had 5 finals and won one. That was it. So yeah, so
But
that
you're
we had
getting to the
such a
finals, man. That means a lot. Like
yeah,
that means
yeah,
like hockey's important. Like those seasons that like you just like barely make the playoffs or you don't do anything. You think
yeah.
I can have a podcast over that shit? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
You got to
yeah,
win stuff.
yeah, for sure. Right. I mean, and that's the thing is you come so close, and the worst thing, like you don't mind losing. I mean, nobody likes to lose. Don't get me wrong. All right,
But
but
the other thing is going to the going to the finals is different than not making the playoffs or not being
for
like
sure.
coming together as a team. You make the finals, you're almost there. You're still you're brothers for life, but kind of in a different way, right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
you all know you'd all do anything for each other, and you
yeah.
almost got there.
Yeah, so we had some really good players. I mean, Gabby again was down there with me in Baltimore, and he was over in Germany, I think, at the time, and then ended up coming back for the last 2 months of the season. And we had Andy Brickley, who ended up playing the NHL with, I don't know, Pittsburgh and Boston and maybe Philly. I think, is a Boston Bruin broadcaster now. And so who else do we have on that team? It was pretty good. Like we had some really good players, and we probably should have won that series. And that's the thing that's most disappointing, because we were the better of the. Even when I was in Moncton, we were better than Hershey. Like we were just a better team, but they caught fire at the right time. And the same with Sherbrooke. Sherbrooke doesn't call up Patrick Waugh, we probably win that thing going away. But it is what it is. And, but the thing is, you can get to the finals. It's pretty darn cool to get to 3 finals. Unfortunately, you don't win, and that's playoff hockey, right? So, but
But
yeah,
the relationships you you grow with those guys that like when you make it to finals of something,
Yeah,
it is different than the guys that like I mean, like, look at my season in Hellbron. I've had one guy on from that season, and
right.
like, it's like, what are we gonna talk about? Like,
You're right. Yeah.
it was
You
a
know,
brutal season.
yeah, we had Marty McSorley. He was a teammate down there too, and he was a teammate of mine in Pittsburgh. And Steve Carlson, I played with him for 2 years, and now Steve Carlson. Most people probably wouldn't recognize the name other than the fact that he's one of the Hanson brothers,
Oh,
right? And so I played with him for 2 years, and
this
really
is
great
all
guy.
in Pittsburgh,
This is Baltimore.
Baltimore.
Marty was McSorley. I had him in Pittsburgh, and then I had him in Baltimore as well. So yeah,
And so he was a pretty big boy, and he was trying to break into the league at that point then. He was just a young buck.
yeah, he was young. He was tough though, right? I mean, he was raw. His skill wasn't quite there. But the thing with Marty, and I'll give him a credit, he was a guy that worked for it. He wanted it, right? So he would stay out after practice and do all the little skill things he needed to do.
Yeah.
And he improved his skills so much, and he deserves everything that he got, right? Stanley Cups and stuff like that. And so,
There's a
you
lot of
know,
those tough guys that did that, right? And they
yeah,
would do that too. They knew what they could do, and they knew what they need to work on to play, right?
yeah, absolutely, yeah. And so he was a good kid too. I like Marty. I still every once in a while we happen to cross paths and talk quite fondly. And so I like Marty. Always have good guy, good team guy. So
Okay, we got to get into now. We've been going a while here.
yeah, I
We're
know.
almost
I'm
falling in the
sorry.
pocket like you and Scott, or myself and Scott did. Not you and Scott did. I did. Like we fell
Yes.
right into the pocket. He had the Bayfield bruise out too.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it's a good thing I'm not drinking. We'd probably only be about a quarter way through this.
I know.
But oh well,
Well,
that'll be the
we're
next one.
almost there. We're almost
Yeah,
there because I think we're leaving Baltimore now, right?
yeah, yeah.
By the way, though, I've seen a television show called The Wire from Baltimore. And
Oh yeah.
was it pretty sketchy? Was it a pretty sketchy area? Was it nice back then?
It was okay. Yeah, I mean, it's like a lot of American cities, right? You go to, there's sketchy areas, not so
There's
sketchy
nice
areas, and
places, there's not nice
yeah.
places. It's where you go.
So where the rink was, it was nice. And my first year down there, basically, I stayed in a hotel down there because I was only there for from basically January on, and that's when Scott was basically 4 months old, 5 months old. So my wife stayed home in Barrie here, and then I went down to Baltimore, and so it was kind of one of those tough years and not knowing exactly where I was going to be, and so that made it difficult. So
That's when life starts getting strange, isn't it? When you start
yeah,
having kids and you're still a hockey player and you're like, what am I doing with my life, right?
yeah, and that kind of came to light, as we're going to get into my next 4 seasons here, right, in Newmarket, right? So
Hmm.
could I have signed somewhere else? Yeah, probably.
So
But
that is where we're at then is the next 4 seasons you're in Newmarket. So that's to be closer to home and you're deciding to be closer to home and you're maybe not making the same money you're going like you could have gone to Europe. You could have like I think if you would have gone to Europe as the offensive player you are, you could have really done her, right?
yeah, I could have, and I think, but again, you have to at that point you go, okay, well, the thing was the circumstances, right? So my wife she wanted to go back to teaching school because she was a teacher before we got married. She had to retire for a couple of years, and then she wanted to get back into it, right? So, am I going to go over to Europe to continue my career just for the sake of playing hockey, or do we have to look a little bit further into our future here and what are we going to do? So she wanted to teach school, and the boys at that point, I think Scott was when I started there was, he was 2 years old, and Andrew just was born that year. And then by the time I retired in 1990, Scott was 6 and Andrew was 4. And my wife was back teaching school. So in that sense, it was the right decision. because I didn't want to
Absolutely.
move. I didn't want to move all over the place. Could I stay in hockey? Yeah. I didn't pursue it, but I knew I could have gotten hooked up somewhere.
Yeah,
But I just chose that I wanted to have a stable kind of stable roots, I guess, or whatever you want to call
I
it for the
totally know what you
kids,
mean.
right? Yeah, exactly. Right. At some point, it just goes off in your head, and you go, you know what? I think I've had enough.
Well,
And
and like, I mean, like to each their own, right? Everybody does their own thing.
yeah,
I want to, for my kids to be similar to myself, is like that you have a home. Like this is home. This is where
yeah,
you're from. This is your buddies are from here. And
yeah.
I got to the point in my career where it was like, okay, it's time to do that. And here we are.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is that, yeah, I don't regret it. I would do it again. And, for the sake of, me trying to further my career or getting into something different. Because even if I hooked on with somebody, and I could have still been in the game right now, just continue to move around from, place to place. And that wouldn't have been good for anybody. And so I thought it was important for them to have a stable place to live and to grow up in, and and they ended up playing hockey, which is great. And but when they played hockey, it wasn't about them making it anywhere in hockey. It was just them having fun and with their buddies, and fortunate enough, they were lucky enough as I was to play pro, right? That wasn't any goal in mind, but they had the talent as you had talent to get to the next level, right? So
Well, I've
uh,
met them too, and I've talked to them, and like, there's a lot of guys in hockey world that like, they always say like, "Well, I'm just a hockey player. I'm just a hockey player," and like, the more I've talked around over the last year, and the more people I've talked to, is like, hockey players aren't just hockey players. Like, they're the guys that'll do anything for anybody. They're the guys that like get it, right? They know how to
yeah.
help something succeed, and like, and I don't know. It's just
Well, yeah.
interesting, right?
Well, and the thing is, you gotta, here's my thought on that, right? Is it you're not a hockey player, that's what you do, right? You're more than a hockey player. That's all. That's just your job. That's just what you do, right? So,
Exactly.
right. So, you're more than that. You got a lot more to give than just
But
saying
you
you're a
learn a
hockey.
lot from being a hockey player. You learn a lot as a
Absolutely.
teammate. You learn a lot as an employee. You learn a lot as like, who's the boss, who's the coach, who's the assistant coach, who's the captain, who's the assistant captain. Where do I fit in this? Where am I? Where do I need to be? How do I help the team, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, and I mean, you're in business now, and I was in business too, and it's all about teamwork to get to a common goal, right? And what are you going to contribute to the common goal, right? So, and that's all business. And so when you're hiring, if you hire ex-athletes, for the most part, they understand what it's like to be a professional, right? And um, you
And
know,
part of a team.
and part of a team. That's what it's all about. I mean, at the end of the day in sports, it's all about winning, and it's winning championships. And when you're in business, small wins means, like, I was in sales for a lot of years, right? So every time you got a good sale, it was a win. It's like winning a hockey game, right?
But
So
and
you
it's
right,
like
it's like a game.
it's like for me with like the Instagram or the Twitter or whatever, it's like, well, this is weird because I would never put this out as like myself, like that,
Mm,
like I'm proud of this, but I am
sure,
proud of what's going on. I'm proud of what's
absolutely.
going on in the shed. And I'm like, this is crazy. Like, what's going on? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to post this because the whole thing is absolutely ridiculous, right? Like,
Yeah.
I just did a podcast with my son who's 8 years old and his goalie who's 10.
Mm,
And in 2 days, there's been over 200 people listen to that.
you're right.
That doesn't make any sense. But I mean,
Yeah.
we'll just go with
Yeah.
it, right?
For sure, absolutely. No, yeah, I mean, I mean, you're here for a short time, right?
You may as well have fun, right?
Well, yeah, you have fun, but be good at what you do, basically at the end of the day,
You
right?
may as well give her at whatever you're doing. You may as well be the best you can, right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So what stories did Andrew and Scott tell you to ask me? I'm sure they probably said something, didn't they?
Actually, yeah, they did. I got one right here on the phone. You ready?
Was this from Andrew?
No,
No.
I'm not going to tell you who it's from.
I'll know right off the bat.
Ask my dad about spitting. Hold on. Phone went dark again. Ask my dad about spitting his tooth at a referee.
Yeah, well, I was coaching the boys, right? Because I coached them when they were playing AAA, and I think I was yelling at the referee or something, and my front tooth came out. I lost, we that Islander series that I was telling you about. I ended up losing the front tooth thanks to Dennis Potvin. In my mind, he gave me a butt end, so my front tooth got knocked out.
He
So
butt ended you in the tooth?
right in the chiclets, yeah. And I went down, and next thing you know, I'm feeling around my mouth, and that tooth is gone. So anyway, make a long story short, I'm yelling at the referee in one of their games, and my tooth falls out and on the bench, and I can't find it. Right, so I leave the rink, and I can't remember if it was the next day or a week later. I went by and I said, okay, well, I'll take a look to see. And there was my tooth sitting there in the corner underneath the bench. So I took it out and put it back in again. Now I did clean it before I put it back in. So
did you spit it at a ref or not?
I didn't spit it at him. It was loose to start with. So when I'm yelling at him, the thing just went like this. Did they ask you anything about the golf or anything? Any questions on golf?
No, there were, like, honestly, with how fast this all went, I would have had more time to prep, but I got bored on a Wednesday, and I was like, I really could use some adult conversation tonight, and I want to talk to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Scott and I play golf every week together, right? So
every week you guys play golf? I thought he had kids.
Yeah, every Sunday he gets out and plays, right? So I play every day.
What?
Yeah, he plays on Sundays with me, right? So whenever Doug
Well, that's
Ford
a good
decided,
bar to set. Way to go, guys.
Yeah, so
good
whenever
work.
Doug Ford decided he was going to open up golf this year, remember, like mid-May or whatever,
Yeah.
I played every day from there until our course closed on November 1st, every day.
Right? Even with rain or
rain, shine, I don't care. I play. I got rain.
Where do you play?
Berry Country Club. Yeah, so I play every day. Last year I played 164 days in a row. This year I played 163.
So you got to be good if you're an athlete by now.
Well, I mean, I play golf basically my whole life, right? So
how good are you?
I'm a scratch golfer. So
are you really?
Zero. Yeah. So I zero handicap. So,
but
kind of the running joke is
65, didn't I? How old
are you? Yeah, 65. So
sorry for burping the mic, folks. He's a scratch golfer at 65.
So kind of the running thing is the boys have never beat me yet in golf, right? Now they'll say that they have, but they haven't. So
I don't know Scott is a golfer, but I don't recall Andrew being a golfer.
He can be pretty good.
Like what? Mid 80s?
Yeah, he's mid 80s probably now. Like the unfortunate part, he only plays like 3 or 4 times a year.
Well, we have real lives, right?
Yeah, but if
like
he
with
ever
kids
played a lot,
and like wives and like jobs,
he'd be mid 70s if he could play all the time. And same with Scott, he probably played 40 times this year. I think he's 7 handicap.
40 times this year. He had a kid.
Yeah.
How many times?
40.
He had a kid though, right?
He's got 2. Yeah. So what happens? He goes out men's night on Thursday.
Impressive, Scott. Scott, I'm not even mad. I'm impressed.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got a great wife who she goes out and plays with her friends on Tuesdays, I think, or Wednesdays, and Scott plays with me on Sunday mornings, right? So he's always home by noon. It's not the whole day, so he gets home around noonish and still has the rest of the day with the kids.
Yeah. Well,
So it works
you got
out.
to you got to choose, right? Golf or podcast, I guess, right? So I guess all
Yeah,
podcast, right?
yeah, yeah.
The
So,
only other person I didn't ask you about before we shut it down because I have it on my notes was Scott Pearson was a young rookie, and I had him on the pod and his son. And just
mhm.
thinking of the father son things, like he would have been a young punk when you're about at the end, right?
Yeah, I think he was his first training camp. I think I was at with Toronto. Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to. I don't recall the year what it was. Probably late '80s. My guess would be.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I can't recall. I haven't seen Scott for a lot of years now. So
No, he was my roller hockey coach just randomly, and I had a son
yeah,
on who almost is making the NHL, and it just like the whole father son thing of
yeah,
this podcast, and like
yeah.
um just interesting that I saw you had played with him. But like, thank you for coming on, and I know it was short notice, and I should have had more random questions from your sons, but I couldn't wait till Friday, and I wanted to podcast tonight. I'm sorry.
No, 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 no issue. Thanks for having me on. And like I said, if you run out of guys to have on, have the three of us on so we can
I
go at each other.
absolutely
Right.
I absolutely will never run out of guys to have on, but I will absolutely have the three of you on together because I think it would be hilarious to see the dynamic.
It would be pretty funny. Yeah. Cause we go
No.
at each other pretty good. Right. So,
I can't
but
imagine with Andrew around that you guys go at each other, but
well, you know what? Yeah. I mean, we can push each other's buttons and stuff. Right.
I
So
understand.
yeah, he was a tough kid to harness when he was younger. And, the only thing only thing he did was refine it over the years, but you saw it firsthand, right? And what he did
With Lordo and
with Lordo and stuff. But the one thing I'll say with him though is I never seen a more competitive kid.
I agree.
When the puck's dropped, it's all business, and I'll do whatever it takes to win. And I'll fight anybody on behalf of my teammates, and it's so.
No, I totally agree. I have played with many people like him, and I didn't have the stature or the physique to fight people, but I was the same way. And I think that's why when we were on the power play together, like we both held each other very accountable.
As a matter of fact, I think I saw one of his fights in the big blue tent, and somebody from Fife, I think, knocked you over right in front of their net right after
And
a
he was
whistle.
ready to rock right
And
away.
he came right in, and I'm trying to remember the guy's name. It's kind of on the tip of my tongue, and
Well,
right in
and
the end,
that's what that's like, and that's what that team was though. Like, if I got
yeah,
blown up, somebody was coming to fight. Like, but then
yeah,
it'd be Hoth, and you're like, hey, you're our top scoring defenseman. You run the power play. Stop it. Stop
yeah.
fighting. Like,
But
let somebody else do that. Right.
yeah, and you're right. And he probably was told many times to do that. But at the end of the day, it's hard to tell him because his first instinct is to go and help, right? And so, and yeah, but I don't, he fought when it was necessary. I don't think he fought when it wasn't, right?
I actually, yeah, no, I never played with Scott. I never played with him, but Andrew was the most impressive defenseman I played with for his competitiveness, for understanding what the team needed from him at that point, and like he'd score big goals, he'd make big assists, he would fight when we're flat in Fife, he would
Yeah,
do anything for the team.
yeah. And Scott was just a different player, right? I mean, but he could play. He was
Oh,
strong,
and I just never
physically
played with him.
strong,
Like
right?
yeah, and
Yeah.
he was a big, strong, ran the power play, right? I
Yeah, could shoot the puck, and played a different role in Cardiff than
than what he
um,
was used to. Yeah.
well than what he's used to, and probably quite frankly, he took a bit of a back seat that year. He probably should have played top maybe 4 minutes. or top 4 minutes, and he didn't. But that's okay because he understood what the whole end goal was, is to win the championship, right? And he knew he had a good team, and but yeah, it was fun watching them both play. And the great thing about Cardiff, though, too, is you get to watch every game, right? Every home game. So I think out of the 4 years that I was watching, I think I missed one game. That was it.
Well, my parents never really got to watch me when I was overseas, right? Like I was on a sling box. I like my parents didn't see me play till right at the very end was when there was the odd stream, and like
Right.
people back home could actually see a game, and like
Yeah.
it's interesting how it can keep you connected to home, right? Because when you're in Germany and you're by yourself and like you're just playing games and your parents can't see you, nobody can see you play, and you got all this shit going on in your life and nobody can even see what's going on, right?
Yeah, and that was the one year that I probably felt the worst for Andrew, right? I mean, that's your son, and he's getting blackballed by some dick that shouldn't be in hockey. And probably Andrew didn't help himself out in a lot of ways, but at the end of the day,
No, but you wouldn't know what it
right?
was. This guy is,
Yeah, yeah,
she's extreme as she gets.
yeah. Anyway, I know we've been on a long time here, and I know you got to go. So
No, I honestly, I can't thank you enough. Like
sure.
literally, like I called you out of the blue on a Wednesday and I was like, can you make this work? Because I wanted to do this. I wanted to get to know you. I don't know. I like your boys. I don't know. I like
Yeah.
everything about the Hotham family so far. But anyways, thank you for doing this, and it was great getting to know you.
Well, I appreciate it, Wally, and hopefully we'll touch base soon.
Oh yeah, and don't forget, like the jersey's up for auction, folks. It's £2 of tickets, or like $4, and maybe we'll make enough money to donate to charity here. And we got the Leafs alumni president on, right? He'll be able to come up with something. Who knows?
We'll we'll talk off air. Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. But thank you so much,
Okay,
and
buddy.
I'm very impressed with your whole career and your two young men you grew up. And this has been another episode of Two Ales and Hockey Tales with Papa Hoth and Wally.